Chapter 4691. A few people were unclear, so the tall, thin old man stepped forward, staring at Chuanqiu Dao. "Little friends, can you take a look at the treasures on you?" Chuanqiu looked at Jian Wushuang, and after getting affirmation, he took out many treasures in his arms. But the tall and thin old man's eyes turned around in that treasure, but he didn't find anything and he couldn't help but wonder, "Strange, I clearly felt the existence of the Baoyang bottle. How could it not be?" Jian Wushuang thought for a moment, then took out the thumb jade gourd he had previously picked from his arms. Seeing this, the tall, thin old man, his eyes full of glory, flew directly to his body, raised his hands and took the delicate gourd into his hands. Afterwards, he sighed with emotion. "It's true that time is also fate. Going around indefinitely, I finally saw my treasure again." The elder Wei smiled disdainfully. "Just a broken bottle filled with things, like a baby, is too much to be a night pot for this emperor. You know what a fart?" The tall, thin old man hurriedly retorted, "Your side of the court is not even fart in front of the emperor's bowl of yang." The old man of Wei subconsciously rolled up his sleeves again. "It's not even a fart? Then let's talk about it and say, who was the mother of the emperor who helped the emperor billions of miles? Without you, your heaven would have turned into gray." The tall, thin old man looked as if he was blue. "You're running for a fart, and Laozi's heavenly court has been broken up, and you rushed over. The emperor didn't pour urine on the spot and washed you away." Jian Wushuang. Spring and autumn. Seeing that the two were about to start in desperation, Jian Wushuang said helplessly, "I said to the two, we should discuss something important." The two of them just pushed their sleeves down, and they were all indignant. "With this bowl of yang bottle, we will be just around the corner when we leave here." The tall, thin old man glared at him, and his unexplainable excitement was revealed in his eyes. Elder Wei also reacted and hurriedly leaned towards the tall and thin old man. "I understand. You mean we go in and take this away from Wan Mushin? Can't the real Wuyang old man find it?" "Yes, you've got a hack in the head of the night pot." The tall, thin old man smiled proudly. "Although this bowl of yang bottle can't carry the heaven, it's more than enough to hold our three old guys." Despite the scolding, the old man of Wei finally showed a hint of excitement. In these 10,000 eyes, although they are not afraid of the invasion of the small emperor and others, for the emperor who once controlled one side of the heaven, it was already too suffocating. Even they themselves do not know how many years have passed. I am afraid that it has been so long ago that even the Milky Way has broken 10 or so. Now, there is an almost perfect way to escape. How can they not be excited? The two looked at Jian Wushuang coincidentally, and their eyes became more and more prosperous. Jian Wushuang felt a slight cold in his heart, and this kind of taste was always bad. "Little friend, we can leave now." The tall, thin old man took a step forward, raised his thumb-sized jade gourd excitedly. "We just need to enter this bowl of yang bottle. We can hide everything with one breath." That's that Jinwu Yang Lao heir came, and he couldn't find it at all. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly. "But if they are found, they will all suffer. I don't really want to do risky things." The tall, thin old man stunned and said hurriedly, "You have 10,000 hearts. This bowl of yang bottle was originally what I held when I was an emperor. It was enough to hold one side of the world. It was really easy to hold the three of us. Not enough." Having finished speaking, in order to verify the authenticity of the words, the tall and thin old man directly pulled the gourd plug and eagerly drilled in, but only a few seconds later he drilled out at a faster speed than before. "His mother, who lives inside my baby gourd, it's stinking." Jian Wushuang is a little clear. These treasures were in the hands of Yenxian in Heishan before. It is very likely that this bowl of yang bottle will be used as a place to live, eat, and drink. After briefly explaining the situation to him, the tall and thin old man who escaped the centrifugation did not delve into it. He held his nose and showed it to Jian Wushuang. Sure enough, this treasure bottle seemed to be able to isolate everything, and it became a line. The breath of the tall and thin old man disappeared completely. "Little friend, how?" The tall, thin old man's figure emerged and he smiled. Jian Wushuang nodded. "It can be, so it is a way, but before that, I need you to accompany me in a play. This is okay, our acting skills are relatively good, especially the goods, the best at pretending to be dead. Tall and thin old man raised his finger to the old man of Wei. This time, however, he surprisingly did not refute, but stared at Jian Wushuang. Let's say, is this strategy an idea devised by Zhen Weiyang's cunning son? The tall, thin old man heard the words, and his face changed suddenly. The old man of Wei smiled coldly. Otherwise, why are you so clever? When your emperor's body disappeared, this bowl of yang bottle fell into the hands of Zhenwu Yang Laoer's army. Guy, holding this bowl of yang bottle, come to clear Wan Yushan, will there be so many coincidences? The tall, thin old man suddenly realized, I said something is wrong, so you have to outsmart? Jian Wushuang was completely numb to these two old men, and this drama that completely made up his mind made him completely ignorant. The elder Wei smiled with pride. Thanks to this emperor's long obsession with the art of conspiracy, you go back and tell Zhenwu Yang Laoer to persuade him not to work hard, and some of our older brothers will sooner or later take his nest. Jian Wushuang has already lost patience. I just said one thing. I do and know the real son of Wu Shi, and I'm not even familiar with his son. If you do and want to do that, then I can only insist on clearing Wan Mutin. The two of them were like enemies, and just before they started, a voice sounded quietly. I said, you too old and immortal, if you miss this opportunity, you are all ready to destroy your true soul. Above the sky dome, wearing the same emperor's clothes and having a strange double pupil, stepped down the cloud, and looked at him contemptuously. The mediocre disturbs me. I believe this little friend and Zhenwing have nothing gu-gu, willing to follow him out of this 10,000 eyes. Su He, are you still awake? The truth has been revealed. Wei old man said in a deep voice. An old double-eyed old man named Su He disdained and sneered. If this little friend is a true Weiyang family, then as early as before, Yang Jun could never escape from his hands, nor could he stand intact. Talk to us here. And, judging from the performance of this little friend, he doesn't know why this bowl of yang bottle is. Chapter 4692. Su He looked at the tall and thin old man again. If it wasn't for Yang Jun who sensed the treasure's breath, it would be impossible for Xiao Yu to take out the boyang bottle. Then you would like to talk about, where did he get this bowl of yang bottle? The old man of Wei questioned. The three looked at Jian Wushuang at the same time. Jian Wushuang thought about it for a moment, and then he will fight Yen Xian in Montenegro roughly. It turns out that I knew that Xiao Yu would never be able to be with the dirty old man. It's all Dao Gong's stupid thing that mistakes me. Gao thin old man said angrily. Elder Wei also anxiously said, you simple guy, just wait for the trap. Dao Gong, Su He suddenly said solemnly, we have already stepped through the step of losing, what can we lose now? If we give up this opportunity today, it is truly losing. The noisy three suddenly fell silent, and no one spoke anymore. For a long time, the elder Wei suddenly rolled up his sleeves and said, come on, tell us how to act. Jian Wushuang twitched his mouth slightly, and then let Chuanqiu take it out before he left. You only need to cooperate with me to save an image in this mirror. This kind of thing is of course the first of Dao Gong to come first. He pretends to be the best. After another in-depth discussion, the two recommended Dao Gong, almost causing the three to fight again. After reluctantly persuading Wei's elders, Chuanqiu held up the mirror and began to record images. Start. Jian Wushuang held up the invisible between his hands, and then cut his head towards the old man of Wei. However, the two only went back and forth for 10 rounds. The old man of Wei directly wailed and dissipated the real shadow automatically. Stop, stop, no, it's too fake, let the little emperor know it's fake at first glance. Chuanqiu shook his head, to highlight the most tragic scene, but also express the most sincere emotion, the kind that resonates. The old man of Wei emerged, nodded thoughtfully, and then started a new round of performance. Then, under the sky dome of this 10,000 eyes, such a strange scene appeared. A figure is holding a mirror and looking at angles to record the effects. There are two protagonists, demonstrating the tragic scenes over and over again, and two old men standing outside the court, pointing from time to time. Little Emperor, there is news in Tianxian Mirror. In the gigantic palace with lights and candles, the figure in luxurious clothes slowly opened his eyes, stretched out his hand, and a picture appeared in the sky, mysterious mirror suspended in the air. I saw that in a world of mad sand whimpering, a black robe was holding up the invisible sword in his hand. As he moved forward, the vast sword intended to directly smash the mad sand from the encirclement, bombarding the unrelentingly in a tall and thin old man body. Even the sky dome was broken, and the true shadow finally disappeared in the infinite sword. Seeing this, the little emperor had already sat up from the Chinese bed, and his enigmatic eyes revealed a meaningless look. How is it possible? Who is this guy? Even he can easily be beheaded. Ma'am, did you find the news I asked you to find? A thin purple robe quietly appeared in the void. His Royal Highness has been found. This origin has become a mystery. There are two people who were unintentionally found in the deep mountains. When they found it, the breath was very weak, and there was no trauma on the body, except otherwise, there will be no news. The little emperor heard the words and frowned, which was obviously not the answer he wanted. Then he turned his gaze to the sky mirror, silently. Is the origin a mystery? Good, I want to dig out your identity little by little. In the middle of the world, when Su He, who had a strange double pupil, was cut under the sword by Jian Wushuang, this acting award, which lasted for several months, was finally declared over. Facing these three living treasure old men, Jian Wushuang only felt that his head was all in a circle, far more painful than going through 100 battles. Chuanqiu wiped a virtual sweat on his forehead and solemnly handed him the inverted mirror. It's finally alive. This emperor can finally leave here with a big swing. The tall, thin old man was excited. The old man of Wei snorted, "Shake it, do you want to drill the night pot? Don't make you look like that." Well, finally admitted that the bottle is a night pot? Jian Wushuang quickly waved his hand to stop. Everything is over, please leave with me. The three stopped the new round of scolding. Then the tall and thin old man took the lead in solemnly arching his hand. Yang Jun thanked the little friends here. The elder Wei then said, Dao Gongxiong thanks Ye Xiaoyu. The old pupil with double pupils laughed. Su He and others, thank you all. After saying this, the three figures turned into three golden awns and fell into the bottle in an instant. Feeling the shock from the bottle, Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly, finally cleared. Let's go now that 10,000 eyes have been wiped out. Jian Wushuang looked at Chuanqiu Road. In the spring and autumn, my heart was surging. From the beginning, I embraced the mortal mentality into this 10,000 eyes. Until the dramatic end now, everything is too mysterious and coincidental. Clearing Wan Yushin means that he can already end his long dark prisoner career and be able to return to freedom. But then, there was another nervous anxiety rising from the bottom of my heart, and Chuanqiu looked at Jian Wushuang with some anxiety. If, then the little emperor will turn back, what should I do? Slowly spit out a murky breath, and a ray of golden awns emerged from the depth of Jian Wushuang's pupils. If he turns back, I will drag him back before he dies. The endless dimness dissipated, the whole Wan Yushin began to be clear and clear, the river began to emerge from the ground, and countless trees and vines began to grow crazy. Looking back at the last cleared world, Jian Wushuang disappeared in its place. In front of the bronze giant palace in Yunding, the two figures fell quietly and then stepped forward. The gate of the bronze giant hall opened, and in the middle of the hall door of the 100-foot-high Yu reading book www. Akanshu. Calm, there was a frail body. Little Emperor seems to have been waiting for a long time. When he saw the figure in the square in front of him, he smiled slightly. My partner, please come and meet us, our guests. After speaking this sentence, the little emperor turned and entered the palace. The thin purple robe walked up to Jian Wu's two sides and reached out to ask for something. Jian Wushuang squinted at him, then walked straight into the bronze giant hall. The rich musky scent with a mild fishy smell no longer exists, and it is replaced by unknown fragrances. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly and walked inwards, followed by spring and autumn. For spring and autumn, the little emperor is like a nightmare. He will never forget that the day the heavenly court was destroyed, a purple robe appeared. Chapter 4693. The Fenghua Emperor died, and the heavens subsequently fell. The little emperor wearing a purple suit like a tuberculosis, as if entering a no-man's land, scary means almost dominated the whole event. All Yenxian, all destroyed, the vast heavenly heaven, leaving only the spring and autumn as the emperor of Fenghua Emperor. Then he was taken to Montenegro and went on to a very long prisoner career. As much as he feared the little emperor, how resentful he was. Step by step toward the depths of the giant palace, Jian Wushuang's gaze did not fluctuate for a moment. A guy of unknown origin, who is imprisoned by chains, can kill 3 emperors one by one. How can he be a stunning and amazing guy in order to accomplish this impossible thing? Silent to the giant hall where the heartbeat could almost be heard, only the emperor's most subtle voice resounded. "You, one emperor?" He turned his body and looked up at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not answer him. He reached out and threw a mirror far away from him. "I have fulfilled the conditions you want, and it is time for you to honor your promise." "Oh, really?" Reaching over the inverted mirror, he just glanced at random, and Xiaotajin changed his hand and threw it to Jian Wushuang. "How come I never remembered a promise?" As soon as this remark came out, whether it was Jian Wushuang or spring and autumn, the heart sank. He did not expect that this seemingly shameless little emperor would be blatantly shameless. Jian Wushuang's eyes sank like water, and a long and invisible sword appeared in his palm. Little emperor's eyes narrowed, and he stepped back subconsciously. The image left by Jian Wushuang was so shocking and terrifying that it affected his ability to judge subtly. Seemingly feeling the heart of his master's forthcoming explosion, the long sword sent out a stern chirp. Moving forward step by step, Chuanqiu also followed, and his last bit of humiliation was buried in the resentment and anger after being played, making him more determined to revenge. The chain iron plate between the necks began to show endless imprisonment power, and the meridians began to be imprisoned. Each time a force was used, the meridians curled up painfully. However, Jian Wushuang seems to have not been bothered by the slightest, and still moves forward firmly. "I said, untie me." The repressed rage sounded resoundingly, and half of his face was covered with the dark blue imprisoned sword Wushuang, which seemed particularly terrible and grim at the moment. In the last moment, there was a terrified little emperor, but in the next moment, there was a strange smile. "Don't waste your energy, you can't kill me now." As soon as the words came out, the thin purple robe came at a glance, and waved to the sword Wushuang. The endless dynamism is like a huge ocean. However, Jian Wushuang only lifted the sword, and the infinite force split in half from the middle, sweeping away from both sides. Xiaotajin's eyes narrowed, and then he said slowly, "I seem to think of it all of a sudden. Promise your promise, I will honor it, but before that I want to ask you a few questions." He smiled slowly, not caring about his current situation, and said to himself, "Are you an immortal, a lord of a court of heaven, or a son of an emperor?" Suppressing boredom in his heart, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "Xian Yun Yihe. Xian Yun Yehe can reach your astonishing level. It is really unimaginable. I am afraid that there are few such arrogance in the world of all areas." Little Emperor Yu rode, "Follow me, I guarantee what you want, the first time will be presented to you." "Not interested," Jian Wushuang said concisely. However, as if he did not hear it, Xiaotajin extended a finger and said, 100 years, you wish me to ascend to the throne. I will divide this whole world to you completely, and I can promise you a few more conditions." I said, "No interest." Jian Wushuang said coldly. "You will promise me, I am not a wicked person, this is just a win-win situation." Xiao Dijuan leaned back on the Chinese bed again, as if he had settled him. "When you leave so urgently, it is not because of fear, but what you are looking for. But in this great Yan Huan, all the emperors and Yan Xian are nothing but a tiny dust. There is no heaven, no foundation. I can guarantee you will die soon, let alone seek aimlessly." The little emperor got up and approached Jian Wushuang softly. "As long as you help me ascend to the emperor's throne, I will definitely let you become an emperor in this great Yan Huan." Jian Wushuang stopped talking, but looked at him coldly. The little emperor smiled, and then stretched out his palm from the extravagant clothes and pressed it between his necks. The iron chain with a big imprisonment shattered. The surging force to the extreme of Yan's strength instantly filled up to the limbs, and the realm of Yan Xian, who had been imprisoned, was completely released, and his whole breath rose to another state. Jian Wushuang gave him a deep look, and then turned to leave. However, stepping out, the dark places on both sides of the giant hall slowly walked out of a purple robe. Every purple robe is filled with vast dynamism, no less than 20 yenxian. Jian Wushuang stood in place, and the little emperor followed up, placing his palm on his shoulder. I have told you my ambitions and secrets, and you know what it means. More than 20 yenxian, even if Jian Wushuang has completely released the realm, until the last moment, I am afraid there is no possibility of rushing out of this siege, 10 deaths and no life. The threat is clear. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang turned his head and said in a deep voice, Are you threatening me? It's not a threat, it's just an attitude, Xiao Dijuan shrugged. This is a win-win situation. I really can't let you go. It's only 100 years, no matter whether it is successful or not, I will not bother you again. In return, everything you want is served, including this entire 6-day realm. The hall is dead, only the rest of the lights and candles went out. For a long time, Jian Wushuang said, Okay. Xiao Daijin's pale face finally showed a smile. Very well, welcome to the new territories. The sword has no two-sided color and is extremely calm, limited to 100 years. Understood. Xiao Dijuan smiled and nodded. Walking out of the main hall, a feeling of detached world emerged in Chunky's heart. The imprisonment that almost bound the unknown for many years was lifted, which means he has been free since then. He didn't expect that Xiaodajin would let him go so easily, or even stop him a little. I am afraid that he has also become the former emperor who survived from the little emperor. Chapter 4694. After the destruction of the heavenly court, all the emperors who failed to die in the war were captured by the little emperor and thrown into prisoners in the next 3 days. As far as Chuanqiu knows, there are 3 emperors who, like him, have become prisoners of the ranks, but only he lives to this day and is also free. In the days to come, I will practice well. Only when I am strong can everything be expected. Jian Wushuang turned to look at him. Spring and autumn came back to God, nodded solemnly, and then he seemed to be determined, and said, Brother Jian, if you don't dislike, I will follow you. Jian Wushuang heard the words and was puzzled. I have been imprisoned for so long, don't you plan to go back and see? Chuanqiu smiled bitterly. The former heaven has long been destroyed. Now I am afraid that the old site has been wiped out. It is just a sorrow to go back. Instead of standing still, it is better to go with the sword brother and go to travel again. Jian Wushuang smiled. Following my journey will be dangerous, are you sure? Chuanqiu rode. Of course I am sure, I have seen it long ago. Rather than spend a lot of time, it is better to do something meaningful. Jian Wushuang nodded and looked at the distant cloud top. Then follow me. Yunju and Yunshu, the sky dome changes. In the next few months, the little emperor handed over the entire 6-day realm of the small orphans and the big orphans to Jian Wushuang, and he left the next 3 days used as a mineral deposit and the 10,000 days. There is no human figure in the world of both sides. As the back garden of the little emperor, the strength is full, and it is easy to fit in the seatless. Shortly after entering Wu, the emperor who usually only lives in the giant palace, appeared in Xiaogu Tian. Brother Jian, can it be appropriate here? The little emperor, still dressed in a luxurious dress with bright colors, gazed and smiled. The sword has no two-sided color and is calm, and no longer speaks after slightly nodding. After these few incidents, he did not have any affection for little emperor and these 6 heavens. The 100-year term was only a temporary excuse. Once the time was ripe, he never wanted to have any trouble with it. You are so alone in this little lonely day, so go with me for the next 3 days. Xiaodajin turned and walked away slowly. Jian Wushuang got up, and after converging his breath, he followed him step by step. The The structure of the entire six-day realm is very peculiar, showing a pagoda shape and overlapping each other. For the next 3 days, it is a small lonely sky, a big lonely sky, and a million-eye sky. As a gathering place for prisoners, there were more than 100 Montenegros in the next 3 days. Every day, there were nearly 100,000 prisoners in the world, and a total of more than 500,000 prisoners were not a small number. Walking down the sky from the Sky Dome, there are dozens of Montenegros in your eyes. I learned from Chunkiest Mouth that there is a spar in the Montenegro that contains extractive power. No matter what state it is in great need. The main reason why the little emperor left so many prisoners is to extract these crystals one by one from Montenegro. Raising his hand and throwing a prismatic black crystal to Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan said, "The crystal produced in this mountain is the foundation on which I grew up. Except for leaving a part of my own use, all the rest will lead to the crossing. Send to heaven and earth in exchange for various treasures." "How do you feel?" Xiao Dijuan asked back. Jian Wushuang nodded, "Not bad. That's nature. This little crystal is enough to withstand ordinary cultivation for a few years, and the price is naturally expensive." Between the two speaking, they came to the most central part of this heaven and earth, and a towering big city was sitting on it. When he came to the top of this big city, Jian Wushuang noticed that there were only dozens of giant ships under construction, and people walked in them like tiny ants. These dark giant ships are not more expensive than spaceships. The two embarked on the cloud and dropped the giant ship. The little emperor waved his hand and the deck responded. The Montenegrin crystal that filled the belly of the giant ship was printed into his eyes. Rao was the strength of Jian Wushuang, and his brows jumped. He waved his hands together again, and the little emperor pointed to the dozen giant ship lanes. "These are the crystals that have been mined and ready to be sent to the rest of the world. This time, you will transport them." "It's not just you alone. I will let the big companion take you along with you, and you can rest assured." Xiao Dijuan said, "Be prepared. The danger of going to the sea, even if Yenxian is a little careless, it is possible to fall into it." Although it was unclear, Jian Wushuang did not dismiss it. Perhaps this time, it was the best time to leave. Remember, these things can be thrown away, but people have to come back safely. On the deck, the little emperor turned slowly and stared. "I don't want to let a powerful arm just disappear." Although Jian Wushuang feels a little weird in his heart, it is not easy to say something. "When will it start?" "Don't worry, I will leave only 10 days later. I will give you personally." 10 days, just a flash. Jian Wushuang in Ziyagushan opened his eyes together with Chuanqiu. Ziyagushan's enchantment opened, and a thin purple robe came to lead him. 10 days ago, a total of 10 majestic giant ships stayed in the clouds. The Emperor Xiaodigen fell in front of Ziyagushan and looked at Jian Wushuang with a slight smile. "Next, everything will be Brother Lao Jin." Jian Wushuang nodded, and when Chuanqiu was about to board the ship, Xiaodigen stopped him again. "No matter what happens or not, it will return at most 10 years, and there will be important matters to discuss with. To understanding." As the two boarded the ship, the little emperor said indifferently, "If he realizes that he has a heart to leave, he will kill him directly, otherwise he will spare no effort to protect him." The thin purple robe nodded, voice was low, "Please follow your highness password." The clouds rushed, and 10 giant ships full of Montenegro crystals disappeared into the sky and flew to the sea. The little emperor stopped for a while and disappeared. Sitting on the bow of the ship, Jian Wushuang seemed to return to the divine universe, and walked in the universe. But here is Dian Huan, a destined ultimate larger than the divine universe, a grand and unknown. Chuanqiu was extremely excited. This was the first time he had left the six-day realm after looking at the 8 galaxy. He even raised his hand and showed Jian Wushuang the scars of the decay of the galaxy. The demise of a galaxy may have surpassed the reincarnation of a universe. The decay of 8 galaxies, he can't imagine how old this young man who still looks like a young man. Chapter 4695. On this first giant ship, there were only 10 people. Jian Wushuang and Chuanqiu were cut away, and the rest belonged to the little emperor's people. In this regard, Jian Wushuang did not have any opinions. Instead, he himself would naturally use the same method. Except for the conversation between the two of them, the rest of the purple robes looked like dead people, standing at the corner of the deck lifeless. After several days of driving, 10 giant ships left the six-day realm and entered a vast and barren galaxy. A giant sea without borders is like a static streamer spanning all the world. Hundreds of millions of stars overhead exude a peculiar huameng, which is extremely beautiful. Sword Wushuang, sitting on the bow of the ship, waved his hand and took off a star, squeezing it into a round ball with the size of a thumb, and re-embellished it in the galaxy. From the six-day realm to the rest of the world, it is the most difficult sea crossing to move forward. Jian Wushuang's speculation may be to prevent the strong players in the remaining world from robbing. As far as the sea is concerned, variables are nothing but ordinary, tidal waves are commonplace, and more importantly, there are countless unknown things that are silent in that sea. The giant ship headed into the giant sea, ripples from the sea surface, and then kept moving forward. Moving in the water, its speed is much lower than in the void. But according to the map given by Xiaodigen, it will take at least 3 years to reach the final destination. Sailing in this huge sea, time becomes the most meaningless thing. However, Chuanqiu is still very excited. This is his first journey of complete freedom, and he has printed everything he can see in his mind. Jian Wushuang was tired, sitting on the bow of the boat and starting to sit down. Although his realm has been completely stabilized in the realm of Yenxian, the damage caused to him by the removal of the mud tire is still indelible. For a long time, his meridians have shown a unique old state. It wasn't until the real entry into this great Yanhuan that the irreversible injury inside the body was miraculously recovered. Jian Wushuang was very puzzled by this, but had no clue. After diligently entering the practice and practice sitting, the entire giant sea was silent. After more than half a year, Jian Wushuang seemed to have entered another ethereal state, and the memory that he had forgotten so long ago began to reappear in his mind. Slightly rickety, the old man stopped stepping on the blood sea of countless corpses, and walked with his steps. His white shirt was soaked with blood. Lao Zun, who carried the power of the entire Black Sea, also stepped forward, and the dark pupil looked at Jian Wushuang without a word. Another mist appeared in the depths of the memory, a kind of strangely familiar but unfamiliar atmosphere rose. You shouldn't come. The catastrophe here is far from what you can bear. You shouldn't come. The catastrophe here is far from what you can bear. A sound of arrogance exploded in Jian Wushuang's consciousness, and at the same time all the figures that had been or died began to overlap in everything, and finally turned into a thick black smoke. Leave or sleep, you should not bear all this. Leaving is the best choice. The familiar sound was almost instantaneous to make Jian Wushuang clear from the chaos. But as soon as he was sober, all the memories that appeared in his consciousness disappeared instantly, leaving even a trace of it. Yes, are you? Jian Wushuang's figure shook slightly, his face pale to the extreme. However, at this moment, a smirk sounded from behind. Emperor, why are you here? Spring and autumn are not filial, so I will come to see you. Jian Wushuang turned back subconsciously, and he saw Chuanqiu suddenly leaping from the deck and flew towards the dark sea. He saw it really, almost at the moment of the spring and autumn jump. He released the force and pulled it tightly, pulling it back suddenly. Afterwards, a ray of dark light appeared on the edge of the fence, and disappeared instantly. Throwing spring and autumn on the deck, Jian Wushuang hurriedly looked up into the sea below him. But apart from the dark water, there is no other trace. The purple robes on the deck also noticed that something was wrong, such as the advent of the enemy. What's wrong? How did I sleep with a sore backache? Sitting up from the deck, Chuanqiu opened his sleepy eyes. Don't sleep, there is something in the sea. Jian Wushuang said with a deep voice, while releasing Yan Li ready to explore in the sea. But to his surprise, even if the strength cannot be retained on the sea surface, just a moment will swallow the strength. There is something in the sea? Spring and autumn jumped up and looked nervously at the sea, trying to find the enemy hidden in the dark. However, everything was calm again, as if nothing had happened. I wish I had thought more. Jian Wushuang murmured. The 8 purple robes regained their previous stances and remained silent. For them, Jian Wushuang did not worry about it and was too lazy to take care of it. After all, 8 people with Yenxian strength were enough to deal with most crises. As for the remaining 9 giant ships, Jian Wushuang also glanced at a glance, no less than 5 Yenxian. After spending his time in shock, it was hard for him to enter the state of enlightenment. The reason was that he was not in him. It was in the divine consciousness that he could not tell whether it was a dream or an illusion. After reluctantly dispersing the inner messy news, Jian Wushuang forced himself to continue to sit down. But not long ago, Chun Qiu's slightly surprised voice resounded in his ears. How is it possible? In such a realm without human footsteps, how could there be these? Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, followed by everything that caught his eyes, and also surprised him. I saw that in the chaotic and hazy mist, there were thousands of Qiangliyu, and Ruiguang appeared in the house, which was shocking. The scene, like a pavilion in the sky, now really appeared in front of me like a dream, but it was really extreme. Is it a mirage? Jian Wushuang, who has practiced since the end of the day, has thousands of enlightened roads. Among them, he also knows a lot about the spirit of the mountain. This mirage is just a spectacle, but there are also good spirits who use these illusions to confuse the monks and drag them into the deep sea to eat. But to say that the illusion that can confuse Yenxian realm is how to exert the power and spirit of the realm? Ningxin broke the fog in front of her, and Jian Wushuang looked at the front again and was quickly surprised. The spectacle that thought it was a mirage of the mirage actually existed. How terrible it would be to spend such terrible energy here to build these Qiangliyu. Even the other Zipeo people were vigilant at the moment. Chapter 4696. The scene displayed in front of me is really incredible. That's just like the mountains rising high, Qiangliyu lined up one after another. Brother Jian, how do you think? Chuan Xiuning asked. Jian Wushuang did not open his mouth, but after staring for a moment he uttered a voice. Go around and leave with all his strength, not stay here for a moment. Several other Zipeo people heard that although there was no big move, they all urged themselves to make the giant ship change its course and advance at full speed. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He always felt that his eyes looked at him from time to time in the dark, but he couldn't tell where he was. He meditated a few words in his heart and hoped nothing would happen. After all, if there was any horror in the water, it would be a devastating blow. The giant ship sailed on the sea at a rapid speed, and the imaginary situation did not appear. This made Jian Wushuang quietly relieved, but then a trembling voice rang out in the spring and autumn. Brother Jian, do you think the houses before you are following us? Jian Wushuang's heart tightened, and he hurried back to look at it. I saw that Qiangliyu, who was supposed to be thrown away far away, not only did not disappear at the moment, but moved closer and closer. The sea surface began to show waves and ripples, and all dark tentacles quietly attached to the fence of the giant ship. At the next moment, the sea suddenly rolled up, rising like a giant mountain river. That Qiangliyu also rose. Everyone was shocked to watch this scene that had already happened. Beneath that Qiangliyu, a muddy black head almost 1,000 miles away from the sea floor. A full of 10,000 pairs of red blood eyes, like tens of thousands of rounds of blood rising up. That is a giant sea octopus that has grown to the ultimate. The indescribable breath diffused out of it, which simply exceeded Jian Wushuang's existing knowledge. And those Qiangliyu grew up on top of this giant sea sky chapter. A total of 10,000 pairs of blood under the head began to emerge, a tentacle comparable to the size of a real dragon, stirring the giant sea tumbling. Even the giant ship, which is almost bigger than one side of the world, looks like a plaything under this huge sea sky chapter. Even in the divine power universe, the ancestor body of Linhe Dragon Emperor Jian Wushuang saw was less than half of this giant sea sky chapter. Recovering from the shock, Jian Wushuang released the unmatched force for the first time, and the invisible long sword appeared in his hands. The rest of the purple robes also released their strengths at the first time. 10,000 pairs of blood eyes tightened at the same time, reflecting 10 giant ships in their eyes, and each tentacle the size of a real dragon surfaced at the same time, smashing the giant ship on the sea. Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed, and the vast expanse of strength turned into a pure barrier to protect the entire ship. At the same time, the remaining 8 purple robe bodies also moved, and each of them was not weaker than the strength of Yanxian realm, and turned into a layered barrier wall covering the ship's hull. Boom! The tentacles slammed into the barrier of enchantment transformed by Yen Li and shattered 6 layers directly. Jian Wushuang and others have received different traumas. The slight tearing feeling from the meridians has made everyone aware of the horror of this huge sea. The remaining giant ships had only 1 Yanxian sitting in the town, and suffered great disasters. 2 giant ships were broken by tentacles. Countless Montenegrin crystals were struck flying, emitting a dark purple mang shadow, and the sky dome embellished was extremely beautiful when it was about to fall into the deep sea. The entire sea surface was boiling, and the giant sea sky chapter rose from a deep altitude, lying prone on the surface of the sea, and with each flick of the tentacles, a giant ship laden with crystals shattered. And on the ship where Jian Wushuang is located, the barriers can no longer support it. The thin purple robe looked back at Jian Wushuang, and then tore a crack through the enchantment and suddenly jumped out. The rest of the purple robes also followed closely, turning into a strong force of strength, and swept towards the giant sea sky chapter. Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth and ran likewise. In the face of such terrifying existence, he released the Chuanjia Heaven Gate with all his strength. The magnificent Tianmen cave opened, as if the fingers of Yao Yao were directly resting on the head of Zhuhai Tianzhong. Wowlala! Nearly 1,000 magnificent pavilions hidden in the mist were completely destroyed, even with their huge heads. That is, taking advantage of this momentary pause, the 8 purple robe figures simultaneously penetrated the majestic force, and merged into the most vast beam of light, which was smashed into the eyes of the giant sea Tianzhong. The tragic howl that shook the heart like the singing of a sea monster, just under this combined force, nearly 5,000 pairs of blood eyes have been wiped out. The unprotected eye chakra is obviously the weakest point of Zhuhai Tianzhong. Thick ink-like condensate poured out frantically from its broken eye wheel, and fell into the sea to actually solidify the sea surface. At the same time, the traumatic trauma it caused made it completely crazy, like a vine-like tentacle waving wildly in the air. Every blow is enough to be fatal. There is a purple robe Yanxian just taking a slow step, directly crushed into powder, and all form and spirit are destroyed. If you know that it is beyond the ancestor level, the more profound mysterious Yanxian realm, just hit by the giant sea Tianzhong into powder. The sword had no color on both sides, and the invisible long sword swept out in his hand, directly cutting off several tentacles. At the same time, all kinds of supreme supernatural powers were thrown out by him instantly. Chuanjia Tianmen, Tianmen Jiao, these 2 complementary ancestral techniques, the power evaporating together is unimaginable. Especially under the blessing of natural talent and primitive universe, it is even more terrifying. Supreme divine prestige directly stretched the cracks of this world. The giant sea was boiling like hot water. With the appearance of these 2 ancestral supernatural powers, even the other 7 purple robes combined with the immortals were overshadowed by it. On one side, the giant palm evolved from countless soldiers, carried the momentum of town destruction and directly bombarded the giant sea sky chapter. Because its size is too large, it is simply inevitable. Even the tentacles that are trying to resist touch this terrible form, and they all fall apart. 2 ultimate ancestral techniques, without suspense, pressed on the head of Zhuhai Tianzhong. The Huamei Pavilion and Qiong Luyu were completely destroyed, and the supreme mighty force pressed it into the sea. Thousands of feet were splashed by the seawater, and almost half of the sea was covered with extremely thick black liquor. Standing remotely above the void, Jian Wushuang's chest quickly rose and fell, and at the same time, as if eating sugar, he stuffed several Montenegrin crystals into his mouth to quickly restore his strength. The 2 ancestral techniques released by this full blow, Rao, is that he has reached the realm of Yanxian, and they are almost not supported. The ancestral technique with a growing nature, which I learned from the sad land, is still terrible after all. Chapter 4697. Moreover, Jian Wushuang can feel that these two types of ancestors are still not perfect enough, that is to say, he has not fully realized. The other purple robe figures juxtaposed with Jian Wushuang have been completely shocked at this moment. They witnessed and participated in the whole process, and naturally felt how terrible the devastating blow just now was. No one can guarantee that he can survive the blow. What is this guy who can't be more than Yan Xian? In the future, there is still a moment to breathe, and not even a half sentence, and a total of hundreds of tentacles suddenly burst on the seabed and plundered to everyone. Under such an unexpected situation, 4 purple robe Yan Xian were directly hit, destroying all forms and spirits. The thinnest purple robe shuddered and burst into a loud voice, "Look to death!" At the next moment, he turned directly into a rush and flew away, and the power in his hand turned into a light group, and tens of thousands of roads were thrown out in an instant. The magnificent and tragic martyrdom exploded, but it did not leave many scars on the surface of the giant sea sky chapter. Under the previous blow of Jian Wushuang, its tens of thousands of rounds of blood eyes were completely destroyed, at this moment no more than thousands. And the black liquid that leaked from the eye will seem to have a shell on it. Although passively beaten, there was no damage. A sturdy tentacle with fierce bone spurs hit him directly. The thin purple robe that was being exported insanely, and then flew back like a cannonball. Sword Wushuang saw this, he directly reached out and grabbed it. Looking closer, this thin purple robe was almost broken into 2 parts from the waist, and only one bone vertebra was barely connected. After thinking for a moment, Jian Wushuang had a brain, and inserted dozens of Montenegrin crystals in his arms into his mouth. It was a matter of fate and death, before throwing him to the deck. After Chuanqiu reached out to catch it and laid it flat, he was ready to board the Battle of the Void, but then he seemed to remember something and gritted his teeth back. As early as just now, Jian Wushuang warned him to stay on the ship and don't do anything. He naturally understands that he, who has not yet reached Yanxian realm, can help a little. Only when he becomes Yanxian can he barely have the ability to protect himself in this chaotic order. At this moment, only 3 figures were standing on the sky dome that was about to break. The remaining 2 purple robes had collapsed in shape. Faced with this terrifying existence, they went on to fight and died, so the 2 looked at each other and looted directly towards the undamaged ship, trying to escape. The twisted tentacles are still waving wildly, and the giant Si Tianzhong immediately recognized the unparalleled sword Wushuang that made it hit hard by himself. A few fears flashed in the remaining nearly 1,000 pairs of compound eyes, and then it was completely mad, and the tentacles were desperately swung away. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were slightly raised. The force that was difficult to remove directly knocked him back thousands of feet, and the tentacles were cut off dozens. At the next moment, a blazing blaze was like a long river of kendo adorned with thousands of stars rushing into the void. Jian Wushuang Wu sat on the long river of kendo and poured out. Millions of sharp swordmans, such as the Milky Way waterfall, fell down, illuminating the entire dark world for a moment, and then directly covered the giant sea sky chapter. In the sword's mind, Jian Wushuang was like a fish. He held an invisible long sword in his hand and rushed towards the skull of the giant sea sky chapter. Zheng! The whole invisible sword penetrated completely. A breath of old and aging came out from the cranial crest. Jian Wushuang was almost suffocated by the broken hole in his body. Zhuhai Tianzhong mourned, and the mouth under the compound eyes began to pour out viscous liquid. It is dying quickly. However, this excellent situation only existed for a moment, and nearly 100 tentacles hit the body of Jian Wushuang together. Rao is already an indestructible body, and almost turned into powder under this blow. Quickly blocking the meridian that has been damaged with yen force, Jian Wushuang's hands once again emerged the invisible sword. There is no fancy straight piercing everywhere, but the void is broken. This is a sword of no end, a sword that has no escape route. Each blow is enough to destroy Yan Xian's tentacles. Under this absolute sword, like a paper paste, it is easily destroyed. This type of absolute sword is a mixture of 100,000 identical sword intentions, breaking the barrier of the giant sea sky chapter, and stab the sword in the head without revealing it. The dark skin was torn, the flesh and bones were emptied into nothingness, and a terrible wound was torn from the unimaginable head. A kind of wild and old breath vented wildly, accompanied by countless dazzling golden awns flashing out of its wound. Zhuhai Tianzhong finally felt the trembling of instinct. Instead of fighting with it, he manipulated the extremely large figure to prepare to escape. However, at the moment it started, the sword came without a sword. He has never been soft on the existence that threatens his life. How can Jian Wushuang let this escape the giant sea sky chapter who is trying to escape now? Let it die while it is sick. Another sword pierced straight down, and the sword on, nearly 10 feet tall, stabbed directly into its skull. The sea was trembling, and the void was finally torn, and Juhaishanshang had completely fallen into rage. It wants to get rid of the rapid passing of this life, shake its head wildly, and try to throw the sword Wushuang out. However, sword Wushuang did not move, and shook hands with the invisible sword to further destroy its origin. However, this giant sea sky chapter is too huge. Even if it is dozens of feet of sword, it is difficult to touch its origin. At this moment of desperate stalemate, Jian Wushuang only felt the heat in his arms, and then a green thumb-sized gourd flew out in front of him, standing in front of him. God, what is this thing? This emperor has never seen such a huge giant. It's really big enough if I put it before. I'm afraid I can't finish all 3 heavens. Hugh said 3 and even 3 more, can't swallow this big guy. Jian Wushuang almost suffocated hard and couldn't say a word with blushing. Well, you seem to be struggling, shall we help? Exhausting the last trace of strength, Jian Wushuang struggled. Sword. The figure of the tall, thin old man emerged, and he immediately understood it and looked at the hilt around his waist and laughed aloud. Unfortunately, this emperor has been obsessed with kendo for countless years, especially obsessed. Let me wait and see my today create your own kendo. At the end of the talk, the tall, thin old man suddenly pulled out his sword without a sword around his waist. However, the blade with a sharp edge was missing, but just pulled out a hilt. Chapter 4698. The air was a little stagnant for a moment, and the tall, thin old man thought, "Did you save this sword body and hilt separately?" The old man of Wei also appeared in the bowl of yang. He didn't have a good air. "Idiot, this is a broken sword. Can't you see it? Otherwise your sword body and handle are separated? But this is such a broken sword, it is difficult to break the source of this evil barrier." The tall, thin old man frowned tightly. The old man who appeared subsequently kicked directly, kicking the tall, thin old man holding the sword. "Let's talk, you go." In the wound as big as a tianqing, the tall and thin old man's hand with the broken Tai Luo Excalibur disappeared in a mixed manner, replaced by a restrained and calm, prestige breath. Although it was broken, it was difficult to conceal the emperor's suit and hunted in the wind, and the supreme force spread out. It is like breaking away, directly breaking through the structure of the brain of the giant sea sky chapter, and going straight to the source. At the same time, the other 2 emperors also started at the same time, and the 2 long mans carrying Dwei merged into one and fell together. The power of supreme terror turned into a beam of light, bursting in the head of the giant sea sky chapter. Jian Wushuang only felt loose, and was blown out by the layers of shock waves. He hurriedly reached for a distant grip, and his strength was directly attached to the head of Zhuhai Tianzhong. With the tragic martyrdom shattered in his head, even these ultimate giants eventually mourned and fell, sinking on the sea surface, and then no sound. When the emperor's true shadow hits in 3 ways, his huge head begins to shatter, and various unknown fragments of tissues splash. One of the unique diffusing forces escapes, but it disappears in only a moment. Sword Wushuang leaped forward, and Gao Qing's invisible sword entered the wound. He seemed to have entered a vast space. There was a golden source in the center of the head of this giant sea sky chapter, like a big sun. With a sword broken, hundreds of millions of rays of light emerged, and all three emperors covered their eyes subconsciously. This Ruiguang burst for only a moment, then dimmed. Shaking his head, Jian Wushuang looked forward, and a stone bead that had been incomplete for more than half stayed there, turning around. What is this thing? The tall, thin old man looked up and wondered, just before that Ruiguang, did this thing come out? No matter what it is, it can definitely be a treasure in the mind of this guy. The old man of Wei stepped forward and observed carefully. The old man with heavy pupils pouted, "Look at your unintelligible sample, this little stone bead is definitely the big guy's tremendous strength, and the accumulation of days and months has accumulated. Although it is not a treasure, it is also a warm meridian. Has great benefits." The sword Wushuang on the side didn't open. He inexplicably felt that the broken stone bead was not the source of the giant sea sky chapter. The tall, thin old man also pouted, "I thought there would be any baby." At the end of his speech, he raised his hand and pushed the stone bead to Jian Wushuang. "Although this kind of thing is useless to us, it still has a lot of benefits for you. Just accept the warm meridians." Jian Wushuang did not resign. Shizhu started, "Except for some dampness, there is no other strange." The broken piece on the stone bead was cut off by some kind of hard object, and looked slightly ugly. Putting the stone beads back into the bowl of Yangyang, Jian Wushuang and the three emperors walked in the head of the giant sea sky chapter for a while to ensure that they were dead before they left. Through this robbery, the entire squadron was seriously damaged, leaving only 4 ships full of Montenegro crystals capsized. Among them, Yen Xian also almost disappeared, and all those who survived gathered in the first giant ship. The soles of the feet landed, and Jian Wushuang returned to the deck. Everyone subconsciously stepped back half a step, and there was panic in his eyes. Chuanqiu hurried forward, trembling for the rest of his life. "Brother Jian, it would be great if you were fine." Jian Wushuang nodded, "Fortunately." He turned his head to look at the number of people on the deck, less than 50. He said quietly that the danger had been eliminated. "Please return to your ship." Everyone heard and looked at each other, and no one dared to leave. Jian Wushuang no longer said much, leapt forward to the bow and began to recuperate the meridians. This battle almost forced him to the extreme, and the two ancestors used their skills simultaneously and instantly consumed more than half of the vigor in his body. If he did not adjust the rate quickly, it would be difficult to cope with the sudden situation. He looked back and glanced. Doubts flashed in the huge sea sky zhang that was half floating on the sea. The real combat strength of this giant sea sky chapter, and the breath he showed are not at the same level, and they can only passively defend against Jian Wushuang's offensive. If it wasn't for the shape is too huge, I am afraid that any one of the 3 emperors could cause heavy damage to it. And there are countless fairy lofts on the skull top of this giant sea sky chapter, Qiangliyu. It is very likely that a powerful person can use it as the cornerstone to create a secret realm. Failing to find some treasure in it turned out to be a great regret in Jian Wushuang's heart. After passing through this catastrophe without fear, the giant sea, which has penetrated many unknown worlds, returned to its former silence. Decades later, the thin purple robe that was pulled into 2 sections from the middle by Juhai Tianzhang woke up warily, and the waist and abdomen were intact. For Yanxian, as long as there is a point left on the Yuanyuan Avenue, even if the body is broken into dust, it can be completely restored. Only this time, the origin of the thin purple robe was almost wiped out even with the real shadow. The face wrapped under the hood coughed lightly and stood up with the help of the people around him. He looked at Jian Wushuang's back. Then walked towards Jian Wushuang. Chuanqiu noticed that after this scene, he immediately became alert. When he was hesitating whether to wake up Jian Wushuang, a slightly deep voice sounded. "What happened that day? The old man thanked me here, and he will return to him in the future." In a word, the thin purple robe instinctively turned and left, unable to speak. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes, shook his head helplessly, and continued to close his eyes and sit. Sailing in the giant sea is extremely boring, except for the stars and the stars, there is nothing more to say. Of course, if there were really living things again, that would be extremely bad. I don't know how long after that, Jian Wushuang, who has entered the sentiment, vaguely heard Chunkius' voice. Brother Jian, look over there. Doesn't it look like a person? Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and followed Chunkius' fingers to a sea not far away. I saw a vaguely swayed floating on the water on his back, and due to the speed of the water, he began to approach the giant ship. Chapter 4699. Jian Wushuang could see clearly when he was getting closer and closer. The vaguely plain shirt was indeed a human, but it was like he was seriously injured, and his waist and abdomen were red with blood. Besides, the whole body has nothing but the weak self-protection. Without the help of external forces, there is no possibility for this shirt to survive. After all, this huge sea that is connected to many places is really too vast and broad. Slightly hesitating, adhering to the repaired sword of Wushuang, he still used force to pick up the figure and place it on the deck. After being detached from the water, Su Shirt's body strength disappeared by itself, and the blood began to flow out from behind, fainting on the deck. Jian Wushuang leaped from the bow of the ship, waved his hand and released Yanli wrapped around his shirt. With a more magnificent and energetic intervention, the body of the plain shirt quickly fell silent. The almost waist-length hair fell slowly, revealing a pale and beautiful face. However, even if it is beautiful, it is difficult to cause a ripple in Jian Wushuang's state of mind. After all, after reaching the supreme, you can reshape the body, no matter what kind of beautiful face can be replaced. But on the contrary, few monks changed their original faces. At most, they were only slightly modified in details. A bit of doubt flashed in my heart. Jian Wushuang was incomprehensible in this boundless and immense sea. How could someone traverse alone? To know that even if it is Yen Xian, a little carelessness in this sea area will die. The woman appeared to be in danger, but left her life. After careful observation, Jian Wushuang didn't notice anything strange, and then sat down on the bow of the boat again. Instead, Chunkius' eyes lit up, and he started to work around this woman in a plain shirt, urging Yanli to take care of her carefully. Time passed by quickly, and after this vast sea of boundless borders crossed thousands of cold and dead heavens and earth, the breath of life began to appear faintly in the heavens and earth on both sides. Fortunately, after going through the giant sea sky chapter, there has never been a terrorist presence under this giant sea, allowing only 4 giant ships to sail out of the most dangerous area. During this time, the woman in the suede who was rescued on the deck also woke up slowly. The first thing she woke up, she glanced around blankly, and then jumped out of the deck without hesitation. The consequence of this is that it is directly planted into the seawater. Rao is a sword with enough strength, and he can't help laughing, waving his hand to lift his figure in the sea. I said, girl, there is no improvement in your injury at all. You just leave like this, just like death. Jian Wushuang couldn't help crying. A woman in a plain shirt like a soup chicken looked at him coldly, and then coughed several times before closing her eyes softly against the fence. Jian Wushuang shrugged his shoulders, and lay on the bow of the bow on his back, taking a comfortable posture to take a nap. After a little hesitation, Chuanqiu prepared to take off his long suit and give it to the woman in the shirt. But then, the thin purple robe that had been silent as a dead man got up and threw a thick cloak to her. The Susan woman looked at him with her eyes open, stretched her hand to cover the thick cloak, and fell asleep again. Everything has returned to silence. The Star River turns on the sky. When Jian Wushuang turned over at the bow of the ship and opened his eyes subconsciously, he saw the woman wearing a big cloak, standing in front of her, and looking at him calmly. With no sleepiness, Jian Wushuang sat upright, wondering, what's the matter? She withdrew her eyes and looked to the end of the giant sea. Her voice was as cold as her entire body. Why save me? Jian Wushuang was dumb for a while, but then said, of course it is unbearable. A wave of ripples flashed in the eyes of the Susan woman. That's all? Of course. Jian Wushuang was helpless, and then lay on his back on the fence. For a long time, the Susan woman said coldly, my name is Jing-ing, and I will thank you in the future. It's not necessary to repay, just raise your hand. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and then fell asleep again. The woman in the shirt named Zheng Ying glanced at Jian Wushuang again before returning to Wuzhua. After the third year, there were finally strong fluctuations in the sky and earth surrounding the giant sea. One side of the world is one side of the hidden world. And from the occasional conversation with the thin purple robe, these hidden sects are actually inextricably linked to them. This made Jian Wushuang, who was about to take time to escape, dispelled his inner thoughts. If it was really like the thin purple robe, he was sure that once he escaped, the drama code of being chased and killed in the divine universe will be staged again. Adhering to the principle that one more thing is worse than one less, Jian Wushuang still escorts the giant ship to the destination. The further forward, Jian Wushuang and others have been able to see the scattered Xiao Yanxian shuttled from time to time. This indicates that they have left the most dangerous area, but some powerful Yanxian cannot be ignored. After wielding the town and destroying several unremarkable ancestral scattered repairs, there was no longer any casual repair dare to come to rob the ship. But this situation did not last long. When hundreds of strong breaths surged in this small world, Jian Wushuang realized that the crisis was coming. The dozens of men-headed reveal the realm of Yanxian, and the remaining hundreds of figures are all ancestral. Jian Wushuang was a little bit sighed with emotions, which belonged to the strongest in every universe, and he was willing to be a gangster in this great Yanhuan. However, there is a certain amount of swordsmanship that can be determined. At present, these ancestors in Dayanhuan and the ancestors in the divine universe are basically two kinds of existence. The most important thing for the ancestors in the divine universe is to control the vast immense universe of luck and avenues. As for the ancestors in this great Yanhuan, they can only control one side of the world. Daquan luck is the most fundamental. Such a group of gangsters headed by dozens of Yanxian is obviously a strong force. Seeing this ship as the existence of a lamb to be slaughtered, the man in the head was already shining in the eyes. All disembark at speed and accept the inspection. A whisper of mischief resounded in this world. But all the people on this giant ship were motionless, and there were many purple robes who even looked at the gangster with sarcasm. In their view, the end of these guys is already doomed. Quickly flashed in my mind, the infamous Luo Ming thief who had met in the universe of the imaginary. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. It seems that no matter where he is, even if the rules of the avenue change, the only constant is always there are a handful of people who like to make quick money. For this kind of guy who likes to make quick money, Jian Wushuang is not disgusted, but it does not mean that he will be soft. Chapter 4700. A fine ghost like Yan Xian took a step forward and said with a high arrogance, "Get me off the boat. After entering my whirling days, everything will be under our control, and if you know each other, you will be able to return you a way of life. Otherwise, they all die without a burial place." No one would believe the words of these desperate men. Jian Wushuang was sure that even if the archers sent the spars of these ships, the desperate men would never let them go. Everyone was ridiculed, and Chuanqiu pulled out a long knife from the waist. With the existence of the one who can destroy the supreme monster with his own strength, it is inexplicably reassuring. Go away. A simple and concise word echoed through the world from Jian Wushuang's mouth. All the gangsters were startled, and then they laughed at each other. A total of 10 Yanxian, nearly 100 quasi-Yanxian, are terrifying to the extreme in any world. And at most there were only 5 Yanxian in these ships, so they dared to speak eloquently. How could they not make them stunned and laughed? The fine ghost grinned, when even pointing at Jian Wushuang blasted a huge wave of fire. However, the next moment, waiting for Jian Wushuang's shot, the woman in the shirt named Zheng Ying next to him shot directly, and a thicker force burst into the sky, instantly destroying the fire wave. Then Yanli, castrated, went straight to the door of the fine ghost face. Boom! The fine ghost flew directly hundreds of feet, and then barely stopped his body. A face was covered with dye shop, and the blood of the gods flowed from the Qiqiao. Jian Wushuang glanced at the extremely cold woman in the shirt, and after a slight smile, he jumped to the bow. Stretching his hand and pulling out the broken tarot Excalibur in his waist, thousands of swords were brought together. Okay, since you are not willing to disembark, then stay here all wandering. The head and strong man smiled abruptly, and a great magical power surged in his palm. A picture of Lu Yao and 8 diagrams, which is very inconsistent with his shape, sprang up from under his feet, among which there was a horror force. The 2 fists are all out, and a total of 100 gossip shapes are like a dense net, covering all over the world. Originally still holding the relaxed mind of Wushuang, seeing this system of gossip shape, could not help but be surprised. These guys are definitely not like the wild fox Zen with the same smell. It is most likely a hidden secular ancestor of some kind of organizational system, in order to teach these moves. The Tai Luo Excalibur is broken, but the entire Tai Luo Jiandian is in the heart of Jian Wushuang, and there are star points of Huamang condensed on the broken body of the Tai Luo Excalibur, serving as the blade. One sword is done. The initial star-cutting magical power is now the same as the same day, and it is turned into a sword of heaven to completely disperse the dense network-like gossip graphics. Then, Jian Wushuang stepped on the bow of the boat, stepped into the void, and spurted out with a sword. The violent sonic boom rang loudly, and ripples spread across the giant sea. The strong man who stepped on the gossip shape gazed, his left hand pinched tactics again, and a more magnificent Taiji dense gang was in front of him. The sword without any disadvantage was actually dissipated after piercing dozens of layers of Tai Chi. The strong man smiled with pride and urged his body to bombard Jian Wushuang again. As the 2 of them fought in the void, more than 100 gangsters rushed towards the giant ship with a grin. In their eyes, they were already regarded as lambs to be slaughtered, and rushed forward, rushing forward. Buzz! A pure pillar rises, and the breath of Yen Xian's extraordinary peak is rushing out like a river. The thin purple robe suddenly flicked his sleeves, and a gentle force like the breeze but irresistible rose, and directly caused the first 10 robbers who had swept back. At the same time, Zheng Ying also moved, and the big cloak fell to the ground. Her entire figure was like a hazy cloud of smoke standing on the outermost side of the giant ship. Chuanqiu opened his mouth, swallowed the words he stopped, and then stood side by side with Zheng Ying, waiting for him. More than 30 other purple robes also jumped into the air together and began to fight hard. With a sword chopping off the gossip treasures coming from all directions, Jian Wushuang's eyes became more and more prosperous. Today, none of these robbers can live. Otherwise, if they escape one, they will most likely suffer a counterattack. It was another sword that forced the strong man back, and Jian Wushuang completely slayed his heart. Immediately, the strong man only felt that his whole body was broken in the void, and a supreme power could bind it firmly, and he ran towards Jian Wushuang uncontrollably. A great horror between life and death flooded his mind. He didn't dare to hesitate anymore, pinched his hands in succession, and thousands of layers of gossip treasures appeared around his body to cut off the invisible bondage. However, Jian Wushuang had expected that the talented supernatural primitive universe had been released as early as possible, directly weakening him unconsciously. The strong man was terrified, but it was hard to escape. Jian Wushuang lifted his sword straight ahead, without any difference falling on his head. The wailing sounded, but the imaginary origin was broken, and the scene of the god's annihilation did not appear. Tai Luo Excalibur actually deviated an inch and cut off his ears. The strong man finally got rid of the shackles, clutching his blood-sprayed head and exasperated. "You dare to hurt me? Do you know that hurting me is the enemy of the entire whirling heaven?" Jian Wushuang smiled coldly, shaking his arms and flicking away the blood on the Tai Luo Excalibur. Okay, then I will let you be completely buried in this whirling sky." The strong man hated the sky, but the next moment was like a meteor, and he fled billions of miles in a blink of an eye. The rest of the gangsters fled when they saw it. Jian Wushuang used his magical powers, and only stopped after killing nearly 20 ancestors. Rao is so, or more than 30 gangsters escaped. Zheng Ying drifted forward, apparently intending to cut the grass. Jian Wushuang reached out and pulled her out and then shook her head. "The poor Ko Ma Chai, if attacked in this sea, will be very troublesome." Zheng Ying's face flashed unnaturally, flicking away Jian Wushuang's palm, and returned to the ship. After releasing so many gangsters, this is something that Jian Wushuang did not anticipate. If it is really as he guessed, behind these gangsters is the so-called hidden world in the so-called whirling sky. May fight back. Brother Jian, what are we next? Chuanqiu asked. He glanced at the dozen or so people left on the deck, and Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "Go forward at full speed and never stop in the middle." The giant ship broke through the water, and every moment counted in millions of miles. Rao was traveling at such a speed. When he was about to leave the whirling sky, Jian Wushuang still felt that a strong atmosphere emerged from the end of his childhood. The undercurrent was surging, and everyone's heart was calm. They did not expect that such revenge came so quickly. Chapter 47:01. On the sky dome where there is no big sun, a series of red awns emerge, linking with each other, like a dense net. It is like to crowd everyone in it. Going ashore. Jian Wushuang broke the line and took the lead to step into the wandering earth. Spring and autumn followed, and Jing Ying's eyes flashed a hesitation and immediately followed. The others, led by the thin purple robe, also jumped ashore. This whirling heaven is the same as other small worlds. The only difference is that it is full of blooming lotus flowers. Looking around, it is extremely relaxed and happy. As Jian Wushuang and others went ashore, the previously escaped gangsters and others all fell from the clouds. I said that if you were to die in this whirling sky, you would never be able to take a step. The strong man whose ear was cut off by Jian Wushuang had not even wiped the blood from his face. There is a hint of humor in the grudge. On the basis of your stinky fish and rotten shrimps, and learn from others' robbery? Jian Wushuang took a step slowly, and the vast expanse of strength surged up. This time, it is not only your ears that fell. The strong man grinned cruelly, and then he stepped back half a step. A few moments later, thousands of colorful shadows were revealed on the darker sky dome, and a lotus platform immediately broke through the clouds and slowly emerged. Above this lotus stand sat a bald-headed Luohan who was born with a fat body. There are thousands of colorful shadows across the background, immortal. Because the aura is too strong, even Jian Wushuang could not help but glanced at it. The ancestors are them. They dare to desecrate you. The disciple, as the ancestor of the ancestors, can't wait for a while to come and dispose of you. The strong man covered his head and pretended to be angry. However, the bald-headed Luohan sitting on the lotus platform did not seem to hear what the sturdy man was saying, looking at Jian Wushuang and the others in his eyes. Jian Wushuang inexplicably felt a little disgusted. How could he not know the meaning of that gaze? Obviously this bald-headed Luohan was not a good bird, and entered the Tao with evil. Old ancestor, old ancestor? The strong man tentatively shouted several times. There was a touch of disgust in the eyes of the bald-headed Luohan, and he slapped him directly with a sleeve. Covering the head that had been drawn blood again, the strong man dared to speak out. I am the wandering ancestor of the whirling days, Ru and other juniors. Why don't you kneel when you see this seat? The supreme dignity is revealed, quite sacred. Jian Wushuang stepped forward and raised his eyebrows with a chuckle. Who am I? But it's just the head of the wild fox Zen. The bald-headed Luohan, who professed to be a wandering ancestor, looked stiff, and an unbearable humiliation poured into his heart. Junior, you just called this Yehu Zen. It was repeated again. Chuanqiu and others couldn't help laughing. Rao was cold. Zheng Yingdu raised his eyebrows slightly. Yehu Zen is a general term for some people who arbitrarily call open schools, enlighten and flow into evil ones, and those who get the Tao have a great insulting effect. He saw the blood like a sword without a match, and even tore the false face of the bald-headed Luohan directly. Jian Wushuang continued to sneer. This is Yehu Zen. He only went astray by 3 strokes and 2 methods, and he opened the school to mislead the children. You are not Yehu Zen. Why did your disciple cut off my ear? As soon as this remark came out, Chuanqiu and others immediately laughed, and their voices resounded through Jiuxiao. The bald-headed Luohan was ashamed and irritable. He jumped up and gave the strong man a slap in the face. Waste? Where did the strong man withstand this slap in the face? Suddenly stared at Venus, and fell straight into the clouds, I do not know what the world is. After teaching the disciples, the bald-headed Luohan stared fiercely at Jian Wushuang. Junior, you now have your life in this seat. Pull out your fangs one by one. At the end of the speech, he suddenly waved his arms. A sharp octagonal and 8 trigram treasure cut open the void and slashed towards Jian Wushuang. His gaze narrowed, and the broken tarot Excalibur stood in front of him. There was a crisis at the bottom of my heart. Jian Wushuang looked forward and saw that the octagonal and 8 trigram treasure suddenly dispersed in the wind and turned into 2 left and right. The blood of the gods fell. If not Wushuang Mu got out in time, I am afraid that both arms would be cut off on the spot. The bald-headed Luo Han smiled and hung his head in Yunshao. Now that you are self-disciplined in front of this seat will make you die more comfortably. The vigorous force surged, and the wounds on the left and right arms that were deep in the bone healed instantly, and Jian Wushuang slowly spit out a slurred breath. Achieving the status of Yanxian, the Chaos Overlord has also been completely transformed for the immortal fairy body, even if the source is broken, but as long as there is a breath anywhere in the world, it can be completely resurrected. 3 strokes and 2 methods, but still can't shake off your name as Yehu Zhen. Jian Wushuang smiled disdainfully. At the next moment, a magnificent Tianmen quietly emerged above his head, and hundreds of millions of ray of Huameng emerged from the Tianmen. After seeing this scene, the bald-headed Luohan was stunned, and then the 2 eyes suddenly opened wide, and the light rose sharply. There is such a pure breath. If this seat swallows you, the state will be perfect. The bald-headed Luohan's voice trembled, and his fat figure also stood up directly from the lotus platform. Heaven is so. He yelled loudly, his arms and shackles struck, and all the dynamism of the entire whirling day had gathered to him. The world has changed dramatically, and even the earth has been lifted by the weird hurricane. An 8-armed wrathful treasure appeared behind him, occupying almost the entire size of whirling sky. This 8-armed angry-eye treasure has 2 heads, 1 light and 1 dark, 1 black and white. 4 pairs of big day-like eye wheels looked at Jian Wushuang and sent a sense of oppression. Everyone feels that the power in the body seems to be suppressed, and the flow is slow. It's all turned into nourishment during my whirling days. I will remember each of you. Bald Rohan said intoxicatedly. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were tightly tightened, and that kind of power realm finally came to him. However, the change is steep, and the head of the giant sea sky chapter can be poked out of a hole-shaped giant finger. When he touches the bald-headed Luohan, the 8 arms behind him are angry, and at the same time, they open their mouths and all the energy is swallowed into the mouth and turned into nourishment. Come on, attack me as much as you like, exhaust all your strength, and finally be completely attached to me. The bald-headed Luohan grinned sternly, and as his body moved, the shocking 8-armed wrathful treasure looked forward. Take a step and stir up the situation. 2 black gold palms came with it, all of them looked terrified, and released their strong strength to prepare for their full resistance. Chapter 4702. Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated, directly held up his palm, and the great power of the supreme force came out. The terrifying power that even Yanxian was enough to annihilate turned into a beam of unmatched light, swayed straight up, and bombarded the advent of the black gold giant palm. However, an incredible scene appeared. The 2 collided, and the thousands of sintered Su Huameng produced by the martyrdom were scattered, but the black gold giant palm was just a tremor. Not only was it not damaged at all, but became more solidified. Retreat. Jian Wushuang's eyes were fixed, and his figure retreated quickly. Chuanqiu and others also immediately set off and tried their best to escape the range of the black gold palm. There were 5 weaker realms who were smashed on the spot and their body was absorbed. The earth was smashed thousands of feet, tearing out a deep abyss. The bald-headed Luohan standing on the lotus floor smiled, and as his body walked, the 8-armed arrogant Luohan behind him also moved away from the clouds and appeared in the clouds, and the unspeakable beauty was strange. 2 heads, 1 black and 1 white, then lowered 4 beams of light from their orbits. Jian Wushuang waved his hand to form a border, and covered everyone in it. Then he held the invisible sword, rose up, stepped on the pillar of light, and went straight to the lotus platform that day. The bald-headed Luohan's gaze condensed, and he lowered his palms and lowered the layers of gossip-dense gangs. The 8 arms behind his eyes also opened a huge mouth at the same time. Rao Shijian Wushuang all felt that the diffusivity scattered around him was swallowed. Small-mouthed Junior, please be on your head. The bald-headed Luohan laughed strangely, and Jiangxi burst into countless gossip secrets between his arms. The sword stepped on the pillar of light without both feet, guiding the invisible sword with one hand and thrusting straight forward. Another great sword. 100,000 swords are unified, there is no fancy huamang overflow, but people dare not look directly at it. The sky dome was torn apart under this blow. The absolute sword is like entering the realm of no one, instantaneously breaking through the layers of gossip-dense gangs, and then the unrelenting thorns towards the bald-headed Luohan. Because everything was so fast, the bald-headed Luohan hadn't reacted, and the saber sword hit his left face. The blood of the spewed out, and a complete left ear fell on the lotus platform. This is a completely naked insult. The bald-headed Luohan recovered from disbelief, and the repeated humiliation made him crazy. Regardless of the wound on his head, he took another step forward. His 8 arms behind his back raised his arms in anger and smashed into Jian Wushuang. A total of 8 infinite powers that cover the sky and cover the sun cover the entire whirling sky. Jian Wushuang's eyes are dignified. From these several confrontations, the bald-headed Luohan, who claims to be the ancestor of the wandering ancestor, is still at the peak of Yanxian, but the dynamism he shows is faintly showing signs of breakthrough, especially behind him. The 8-armed wrathful spectacle even made it exceed it in one fell swoop, reaching a certain unknown state. The terrible power shook the world, and Chuanqiu and others have already opened the barriers of strength in order to deal with this disaster. And Jian Wushuang wanted to set aside the Bo Yang bottle to allow the 3 emperors to participate in the war, but there were still more than 20 little emperors on the sidelines who accompanied him. If he released the 3 emperors hurriedly, he was afraid that he would not be able to explain it anyway. After quickly dismissing this thought, Jian Wushuang thought about it, and the style of Tianmen came to mind. The giant palm covering the sky, which was condensed by the quintessence of thousands of soldiers, surged like a big day and hit the 8 black gold giant palms. Layers of blasting ripples swept up from the center point, instantly swept away the clouds and mist that enveloped the entire whirling sky, and at the same time, the huge sea surface also stirred up huge waves. In this unimaginable martyrdom, even Yanxian couldn't withdraw from the whole body. Even those who were far away from the battle circle, such as spring and autumn, felt strong palpitations. Jian Wushuang retreated half a step, and the Tianmen Jifu eventually dissipated, but the 8 black gold giant palms were still bleak to the extreme, but they still existed, and the unstoppable guy came to him. On the occasion of a desperate attack, a sturdy yet extremely tenacious dynamism turned into layers of barriers, blocking the top of Jian Wushuang's head, which actually made those 8 black gold giant palms difficult to enter. At the same time, a thin purple robe did not know when to appear behind his back, buzzed out 2 words, "Go." Jian Wushuang grasped the enlightenment and immediately flew away, turned into the sharpest arrow, and shot at the bald-headed Luohan. Thousands of strands of huamang condensed in Jian Wushuang's palm, almost when the bald-headed Luohan reacted, and then surrounded him to the sky. Bald-headed Luohan's face flashed a little panic. He hurriedly waved his hands, then abandoned the lotus platform and sat in the palm of his back with 8 arms in anger. Jian Wushuang rushed to his feet, chopping the lotus platform with 1 foot, and gazing at the bald-headed Luohan's gaze calmly like water. The ears cut off by a sword have grown back, but he is still angry and resentful in his heart after being repeatedly humiliated. Even if the bald-headed Luohan now understands that he has kicked the stubble, he can no longer look back under the drive of his mind. As long as it can be completely swallowed, it will certainly be able to take that step. At the thought of this, the bald-headed Luohan flashed in his eyes and sneered at Jian Wushuangdo. "Junior, if you are willing to kneel down and knock on 3 sounds for this seat today, This seat will ignore your previous suspicions and let you leave Whirlpool, how? Jian Wushuang was so calm that he smiled coldly. Depending on your incompetent practice, it also deserves to let me kneel? If you knock 300 loud heads at me, I might consider keeping you a whole corpse. Crazy man, this seat is sitting here today to see how you can treat me. The bald-headed Luohan stood up and stood in the arms of his 8 arms, screaming loudly. Undoubtedly there was him. Jian Wushuang lifted the sword and swept away, and the vast sword slashed forward, but he did not shy away, and took it with his body. Jinny swept through and directly cut off one of the arms of bald Rohan. Then he cried with a pain in his arms, and his subconscious body stepped back, obviously trying to escape. With such a good opportunity, Jian Wushuang didn't want to miss it, and went straight to catch it. Prepared to kill him directly. With thin purple robe and Jing Ying and others glaring at the 8 arms, Jian Wushuang could fully pursue the bald-headed Luohan. After being cut off, he seemed to be scared and dared to move forward, and his speed was a bit slow. But within a few breaths, Jian Wushuang had already come behind him, straightening his sword straight down. The change was abrupt, and an arm grew out of the back of the bald Arhat and caught the sword. Hey hey! A weird voice sounded. On the back of the bald-headed Luohan with only a few locks of hair, an ugly face was born, and the huge bread-like lips could not help but talk to the sword. There was a chill in Jian Wushuang's heart, and he immediately lifted the sword into the mouth of this strange face. Chapter 4703. The surging swordsmanship did not achieve the desired effect. After smashing into his mouth, he entered the sea like a mud bowl without any waves. At the same time, a wave of horror suction surged towards the sword without a shadow. He only felt the uncontrollable passing of the internal force, while the skin of the divine body was rapidly aging. He is eating. However, everything is too late. Jian Wushuang is difficult to get out. The bald-headed Luohan was laughing wildly, his belly as big as a bucket, and swallowed his entire whale directly into his belly. When the last ray of Huameng completely disappeared, the whole process was only a few tens of hours, and irresistible excitement appeared on his front and back faces. As long as he is swallowed, even Yenxian can never escape. The bald-headed Luohan was already in ecstasy, and he was already able to imagine the scene when he took that step completely. Thinking of this, the bald-headed Luohan no longer stayed, flew straight to the 8 arms and glared. Sitting back on the top of his head with 8 arms raised, he glanced coldly at the few people who were struggling to resist, and then closed his eyes and began to digest. His current imperative is to take that step completely. At this moment, the black robe sword Wushuang entered a strange space. It was all chaotic haze when I looked into my eyes, and the slightly damp ground under my feet. If he guessed right, the space where he was at the moment was in the belly of the bald Arhat. In the chaotic and strange haze, the strength of the body was slowly stripping away, but Jian Wushuang's face was not worried at all. Even earlier, when the bald-headed Luohan raised the thought of swallowing, Jian Wushuang had already realized it, and he entered it into his belly. If there is no 3 emperors around, Jian Wushuang will certainly not dare to be so rashly suspected, but now it is different. Before the 3 emperors have left, they will be his biggest cards. And it can be a good way to directly destroy this rather insidious ancestor of the wandering ancestors from the inside. After removing the Boyang bottle from the waist, Jian Wushuang directly pulled out the bottle stopper. Immediately afterwards, the 3 bodies scrambled out of the bowl of yang. What is this thing? It burns the emperor. I blame you, old man. You can get nothing when you sleep, and blindly inject any strength in it, causing the emperor's beard to be almost in trouble. Seeing the 3 emperors yelling at each other, Jian Wushuang was big again, which seemed to have become a fixed way of playing for the 3. Shut up, Hugh wants to fall in front of Xiaoyu. The old man with heavy pupils coughed and then smiled forward. Xiaoyu called me 3 to appear, but what trouble did you encounter? Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. When even arching his hands, he told all the emperors what happened before him. After a few words, the 3 emperors turned their heads and looked around for 4 weeks. That is to say, we are in that guy's belly now? This guy's realm is pretty good, and it's almost a step away from that step. The old man with heavy pupils asked. The old Wei snorted, you can't get anything on the countertop by crooking the evil way, so even if he continues to practice, he can never become a king. Last nonsense. After this succession, how many people can be as good as us, able to get good luck, and ascended to the throne to create a heavenly court, accepting the arrogance of the heavens? The tall and thin old man said with pride. Surprisingly, this time the other two emperors did not refute, all agreed. 3 predecessors, can there be a way to hit this guy hard? Jian Wushuang is another archer. The 3 emperors heard the words, and after seeing them right and left, the tall, thin old man smiled triumphantly. What's the difficulty? This old kid has reached his peak, but he hasn't been able to take that step. There is a crack in his mind. As long as we find it, everything will not break through. Jian Wushuang nodded, then stepped forward. And the 3 old men in the damaged imperial clothing all lie on him and act as a guide. Moving forward in the dark, with the luck of the 3 emperors, the vitality in the body has not dissipated, and there are signs of recovery. Away from the layers of fog, countless monks whose unconscious souls floated in this strange space. It's really stinky generation. I'm sure that the evil spirit of this old boy was definitely learned from Zhenweong. The tall, thin old man waved his hands in disgust, and at the same time, an Emperor Hui wrapped around Jian Wushuang's body. Mo Yao is contaminated with these causes and effects. The other 2 emperors nodded affirmatively, waved their hands and started to disperse the real souls that were coming up close together. After completely dispelling these true souls, Jian Wushuang counted more than 90,000 steps in his heart, and then he reached the place where the wind blew loudly. There was a raging wind, but for him, it didn't matter. The 3 emperors jumped from behind Jian Wushuang and stood at the forefront. This should be the weakest point of the old kid. Old Suha should be yours this time. The tall, thin old man said squintingly. When did this emperor make no effort? The old man with heavy pupils pouted, and while speaking, his palm flicked forward. Immediately, an extremely complex palm line, carrying Di Hui, bombarded the weakest point. The grotesque world of this side suddenly trembles, and there is a wailing roar that does not know where it came from. Cracks radiating golden awns began to appear. The tall and thin old man and the Wei old man also started to move at the same time, each raising their palms and waving, 2 magnificent and full of Emperor Hui palm lines, kickasen forward. Combined with the power of the emperor, without God's brilliance, it would easily break through this strange world. Although it had been expected for a long time, Jian Wushuang was taken aback by being so relaxed and freehand. The uncontrollable atmosphere appeared when the 3 emperors swayed the emperor pattern. At the same time, he also relieved himself secretly. If he was in Wanyushan, he had killed one of the emperor's real shadows, regardless of whether he would leave Wanyushan alive. The kind of incomparable hegemony, even if it is only for the real shadow of the emperor, is also trembling. At the same time, the bald-headed Luohan, who was sitting on his shoulders with 8 arms glaring and absorbed Wu Sit, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his belly. With the belly button as the center, a series of gold streaks spread, and almost all of his stomach was covered in an instant. In the next moment, it bursts directly. With hundreds of millions of strands of huameng glowing out, the light reflected the entire whirling sky. No! The bald-headed Luohan made a difficult voice. He wanted to escape from all odds, but his entire body had long been shattered, leaving only an ugly head. Chapter 4704. Jian Wushuang didn't know when to appear. His figure stood in the void, and hua meng overflowed from his fingers, like the sand, scattered throughout the whirling sky. The people who were struggling to resist only felt that the pressure on the whole body was relaxed, and the almost shocking 8-arm anger was actually stopped at this moment, and then the 8 arms closed and the 4 eyes closed. Why? What's going on? Chuanqiu was puzzled at first, and then looked at the Wushuang sword that stood on the void, and the golden sand-like huameng surging around him. They all understood. Jian Wushuang has already given him a kind of strong image in the invisible form, trying to turn the tide and keep everything in his mind. The last one who can give Chuanqiu such a sense of centering is his Emperor Fenghua. With the stagnation of the 8 arms, the entire whirling sky fell into a verge of collapse. The shattered bald-headed Luohan was blown up, his eyes wide open, and he looked desperately at Jian Wushuang. Although Yenxian realm, as long as the breath is endless, it is close to immortality, but he is horrified. He feels that everything in his body is quickly dissipating, like being stripped by some kind of supreme energy. Slowly spit out a muddled breath, Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and grabbed it, and then he captured the bald-headed Luohan's head in his hand. The great horror between life and death made his teeth tremble, and even the words were incomplete. Yen, Master Yenxian, please let go. Jian Wushuang was obviously too lazy to talk nonsense. If this bald-headed Luohan had not been able to wait for the robbery, then there must be no such series of things. This is the end of the matter. 2 fingers outstretched in the middle of the face of the bald-headed Luohan. A domineering energy that could not be overcome at all shattered his source. Do not. The ugly head is fragmented, which occupies the entire whirling ancestor, and eventually dies in Jian Wu's hands. In order to prevent him from dying, Jian Wushuang used the magical power to completely wipe out the world with hundreds of millions of miles of whirling sky, and wiped out any breath that might be revived. At this point, on the premise of not hurting other creatures, most of the whirling days have been reduced to death. As the bald-headed Luohan fell, the shocking 8-armed eyes did not disappear, but turned into a slab-sized painted pottery and fell into the hands of Jian Wushuang. Stretching 8 arms, staring like a bell, it was a bit ugly. Falling from the void to the ground, Chuanqiu came forward excitedly. Brother Jian, great. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and threw the palm-sized colored pottery to Chuanqiu. Send you. What's this? Chuanqiu caught it in a hurry and fiddled with it curiously. As soon as the bald Arhat died, his disciples who were originally scattered as birds and beasts were wiped out by Jian Wushuang. As soon as he jumped onto the deck, Jian Wushuang returned to his old position on the bow and began to sit up. Zheng Ying glanced at his back, then walked back to the ship. In the battle in the whirling days, the team with a large number of people left only less than 20 people, and more than half of them were killed in the Sea of the Giant Sea. And this turbulent voyage is about to come to an end. Through the whirling world, continue to move forward. Within a certain period of time, the mysterious Zheng Ying quietly disappeared again. Somehow, Jian Wushuang was unable to say anything about this woman who had become a mystery. As the waterway approached its end, one side's immense and magnificent heaven and earth replaced the previous waves. The mysterious atmosphere also relieved Jian Wushuang's vigilant heart. From time to time, Yenxian, who rides a fairy crane, leaves a splash of white on the sky. Various extreme forms seem to constitute the main color of this great Yanhuan. After several years, the ship finally sailed to the Enjingchuan. This is a majestic super heaven. It is rumored that this was a dojo without the understanding of a king of God. It was full of strength, but it was immortal. Looking at the several giant ships driving in the giant sea, the top repairers have already been surprised and not even curious. Swimming across the river, several giant ships entered one after another, and at this time there were dozens of black-shirt Yenxian coming out of the sky. The thin purple robe immediately threw a pale gold seal from his hands and fell into the hands of the first person. After counting the interest, the head of the black-shirt Yenxian flicked, and the sky door constructed by Yunwu Yanli opened. It's finally here. Chuanqiu stretched out a long lazy waist, and his eyes glanced forward subconsciously, his figure suddenly stunned. Jian Wushuang also frowned. I saw that after the heavenly gate of Neijingshun, a body dressed in extravagant clothes, with a slightly scattered figure on his face, stood there as if he had been waiting here for a long time. Seeing the giant ship arrive safely, the little emperor smiled and jumped towards the deck. Have seen the little emperor. The thin purple robe carrying more than 10 purple robe kneeled down on one knee and returned to life. Great companion is accompanied by labor. Xiaodigen nodded his head, Yanli turned into a breeze and lifted the thin purple robe and others, and then he turned his attention to Jian Wushuang's body. Good job, what do you want? Goddesses, exercises, heaven and earth? Listed dozens of them one by one, he waited for Jian Wushuang to reply. 50 years. Jian Wushuang said something unintelligible. The little emperor smiled. 70 years. Jian Wushuang acquiesced and then said, since there is nothing wrong, I will go back to sleep. Don't worry, you haven't been to this place before, and I'll take you here for a turn. It's not too late to return. Little emperor finished his words and didn't wait for Jian Wushuang to answer, so he carried his hands. Yu hurried to Jingxuan. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly, then said to Chuanqiu beside him, you are waiting for me here, and I will go back when I go. Chuanqiu glanced around and quickly shook his head. Forget it, I'm still following brother Jian, we can take care of each other. Jian Wushuang didn't say much, and his figure moved forward. As one of the most vast worlds, has terrible heritage in Sichuan, and the monks who can come here are all top repairers. Just a glance, there are dozens and hundreds of ancestors. In terms of ancestry, Jian Wushuang had a brief discussion with Chuanqiu not long ago. There is no such thing as an ancestor in this great Yanhuan, but it is replaced by Yanjing. In other words, every ancestor in this great Yanhuan is actually called Yan. At the same time, the ancestors of these dynasties who belong to the ancestral class are slightly less powerful than the ancestors in the divine universe. And this half of it belongs to the great luck of the road, which cannot be copied and is unique. Going side by side with the little emperor, he laid his feet in front of the portal of the river, and marched on this reckless and vast plain. Chapter 4705. Except for the flocks of cranes on the sky dome, the rest is to pass the top of the head from time to time. After being promoted to Yanxian, in addition to using the mind to shuttle, the most simple little magical power, such as Shudishan, is also widely used. Obviously, this little emperor is already a Yanxian. The two used the magical powers of shrinking mountains and rivers to travel over the mainland. It was hard for spring and autumn, and he sprinted with all his strength, but it was only able to follow behind the two. With a breadth of tens of thousands of miles, this great river and lake in the Chuantian domain has a net view. Among them, there are no fewer than 100 prosperous cities, and even Yanxian exchanges their experiences and exercises here. Jian Wushuang and Xiaodigen walked in one of the largest sky cities, where thousands of roofs were repaired and prospered. Countless rare treasures are randomly placed on the ground for exchange and trading. This thing is a hard currency, and you can basically buy everything you need. Xiaodigen's palm rubbed a thumb-sized Montenegrin crystal, and then threw it into Jian Wushuang and nanobag. Use whatever you want. Although there are many top repairs in this prosperous sky city, there is no one noisy. Everyone seems to have a goal when they come here, and they leave immediately after completion. Walking in this, Rao Shi used to see the treasure of Wushuang's sword, and also began to be tempted. There are all kinds of treasures, some of them are even broken with fine emperor luck. Jian Wushuang is also among the horrible treasures in this stock, and has selected some useful kendo books. As the little emperor said, the Montenegrin crystal was really a hard currency, but it was the crystal of a small ship, so he bought 4 or 5 copies of kendo alone. For kendo, Jian Wushuang hopes to draw a point of insight from each unknown kendo to enrich his entire kendo framework. The little emperor beside him especially likes to buy some gadgets that are useless but clever. Along the way, the gadgets stuffed into the bag were no more than 100. Jian Wushuang didn't really like the place where the crowd gathered. Just as he was about to explain the situation, there was a strange feeling in the sky, which made him subconsciously look at the unobtrusive paving on his side. Among the various treasures that seemed to have been deserted for infinite years, a slap-sized bone armor with dense and intricate patterns was reflected in his eyes. Stopped, Jian Wushuang came to the pavilion step by step. His eyes were already wide open. From his point of view, the inscrutable obscure patterns on the bone armor seemed to constitute a certain pattern or text. 1. Mysterious. Jian Wushuang trembled, and subconsciously took the bone armor with his hand. An extremely old palm suddenly grasped his wrist like an eagle claw, making it harder to score a half. Everything on my stall will only be exchanged and not sold. A hoarse and low voice sounded from under the shabby robe. Only half of the face exposed from the hood was covered with black and white stubble, and it looked extremely old. Jian Wushuang, who had wanted to throw the entire bag to him, was stunned, but he didn't know how to answer. At the moment of the stun of Jian Wushuang, his palm like an eagle claw suddenly cut open the palm of his palm, and I did not know what was taken out. Everything was completed in an instant, and it was almost over when Jian Wushuang reacted. He yanked his palm back suddenly, only to find that his palm was intact and there were no scars at all. But that kind of tangible pain still reminded of Wushuang, everything that happened just now is true. What did you do to me just now? Jian Wushuang's voice was low, and a pair of cold eyes was already flowing out of the murderous opportunity. It's just a negligible exchange condition that is harmless to you, now it's yours. The stallkeeper hidden under the black robe whispered, and placed the bone armor in Jian Wushuang's hands. After realizing that there was nothing strange in the body of the god, Jian Wushuang was too lazy to investigate, and looked at the bone armor in his hand with a frown. The little emperor who stood aside saw this when he saw that his anger was not good, and he immediately showed interest, crouching down and looking at the bone armor together. The glyphs that could be seen vaguely from a certain angle disappeared when viewed carefully. The mysterious characters and characters that had become clearer in the past are no longer visible at this moment. But Jian Wushuang has a kind of intuition. This bone armor definitely records some kind of ancient things, and it must be related to that one. This bone armor, where did you get it from? Jian Wushuang raised his eyes and asked him. The stallkeeper shook his head. I don't know. No one can know his origins. Perhaps only when he has to appear, everything will be clear. Unorganized sentences are obscure and difficult to understand as if they were foreshadows or signs. Just when Jian Wushuang wanted to ask again, the guardian spoke again, but this time, it was about their safety. Someone is looking at you in the dark, just do it. Jian Wushuang heard the words, thought about it, and looked subconsciously not far away. Thousands of monks have been deliberately hiding their breath, all looking at this moment. Buzz. Nearly 100 arrows from the sky, carrying supreme force, swept from all directions. Jian Wushuang suddenly waved his arm, and a pure barrier was to wrap all three of them together. Zheng, zheng, zheng. Each one had arrows thick enough to penetrate through the barrier wall, but then it was difficult to score a half. Looking at the sharp arrows less than 1 finger away from his own eyes, the little emperor's face was extremely gloomy. Jian Wushuang was silent, and raised a palm to move away from the air. When the void collapsed, a man in black robe was directly carried over by him. But without waiting for everyone to speak, the captured man in black robe actually smashed his source directly and turned it into a powder on the spot. At the next moment, the sky above the entire sky city cracked directly. Hundreds and thousands of people in black robes swept across the sea like a deep sea that could not see the side. Rao is Jian Wushuang, his face is a bit ugly. From these figures surrounded by all directions, he noticed the breath of at least 15 Yenxian and the countless ancestors. Are these all looking for you for revenge? Jian Wushuang frowned, looking at Xiao Dijuan. The little emperor's eyes are as thick as water. How do these dogs and debris know that this seat is here? Chuanxiu touched Sword Wushuang without knowing the trace, and his eyes signaled to leave quickly. Jian Wushuang did not make a decision. For Xiao Dijuan, he didn't have a good opinion, but he couldn't talk about it. At first, he stayed in the 6-day realm out of coercion, but now, this situation seems to have a turning point. 9 Heavens Emperor. Chapter 4706. If the little emperor dies in this siege, then the promise between the two of them will be countless, and he will be alone, looking for everything hidden behind the mist. Various thoughts flooded into my heart. Jian Wushuang did not make any statement. At this moment, all the top repairs in this day's city had already escaped. The vast city was so dead that there was only breathing. Nearly 1,000 body shapes came from all directions, with a sense of killing in prudence. The strength of the mutual connection turned into the strongest prison cage, covering the entire Sky City. The little emperor was very calm, standing in the same place. His hands were fast, and he was correcting the dress of the luxury, and then tightened the jade belt around his waist, and pulled out a slender soft sword. This was the first time Jian Wushuang saw him shot, a unique and lonely breath surging. Immediately thereafter, Xiaodigin lifted the soft sword in his hand and did not hesitate to cut off the long hair from his back to his waist. All the half-steps with no trace of body shape, the eyes with Sun Lung's indecision still unabated. It's your intention to let you know the whereabouts of this seat, but if you want this life, see if you have that qualification. The little emperor's eyes slowly swept over everyone, and the long hair cut in his hand fell to the ground. The silent death battle begins quietly. With a sword out, the supremacy is like a thundering dragon rushing towards the nearest black robe. Some of the weaker ones were strangled on the spot by the sword spirit that Yanli transformed into. Holding the slender soft sword, the little emperor entered the unmanned state, and at the same time as the sword was cut out, another palm came out. But it was just a few minutes, and dozens of ancestors fell into his hands. But when the nearly 15 Yenxian surrounded them, the little emperor who had the upper hand immediately fell off. At most, he is the peak of Yenxian. How can he resist the 15 tricks of Yenxian who are also Yenxian? With one finger, the waist and abdomen were centered, and the little emperor stepped back half a step, and a flush of red appeared on both sides of the cheek. The extravagant clothes were torn, and there was a trace of blood overflowing. At the same time, 15 Yenxian, 15 Daoyanyan forces combined, shot at the little emperor. At this moment of life and death, Jian Wushuang shot, including the palm of the surging sword, directly past him and faced forward. The polar day flashed over, and the layers of shock waves made the ancestors unable to act in the blasted center. Take one enemy 15. Jian Wu took a step back without double weight, completely offsetting the 15 Yenxian's combined efforts. The little emperor's eyes widened, and he looked at him with some meaning. I don't want to die, I try my best to kill here. Jian Wushuang did not look back, his voice low. The little emperor heard the words and smiled slightly. Understand. 15 Yenxian who were also repelled glanced at each other and ran forward again, encircling the three with a more violent yen force than before. Jian Wushuang apparently did not want to fight a protracted battle. In order to cause more extensive damage in the first time, he directly released the ancestral power world gate. The sky-covering giant finger broke through the cage barrier on the sky dome, like thousands of suns falling. All black-robed people feel a strong sense of crisis and try to avoid it. However, when the Chuanjia Tianmen was completely released, there were hundreds of ancestors who tried to resist, and they died on the spot and turned into powder. Even the pavilions in the Sky City are under this style, and a gap has been wiped out. With the dissipation of the Tianmen gate of the power realm, a more majestic horror kendo pours out, turning into a long sword of kendo. Some ancestors died on the spot, and even a black-robe Yenxian was accidentally cut off half of the body. The little emperor is located on the side of Jian Wushuang's body, and in the extravagant clothes, he easily grabs any ancestor who comes forward. 3 pairs of thousands, this is impossible and crazy. Although the ancestors can't do much damage to Jian Wushuang and Xiaodigin, but with their attracted damage, the 15 Yenxian still caused great trouble to the two. A sword lured the first immortal who approached first. Jian Wushuang directly released the vast sword and barely separated them. At the same time, more than 10 purple robes rushed to death from a distance. Little Emperor, the big companion is late. The thin and small Zipeo directly swung his arms away from the ancestors, blocking him in front of him. Not late, just came, Xiaodigin smiled, and rush out with me. At the end of the speech, the vigorous force rose up and swept across the field. Spring and autumn are struggling to support, but he is an ancestor. Without the protection of Jian Wushuang, I am afraid that he would have been strangled as a fan. Unwilling to be reconciled to this, he reached out and took out the 8-arm colored pottery previously given to him by Jian Wushuang. The 8-armed colored pottery rose in the hands of spring and autumn in the hands of the storm, but in an instant, it grew into a shocking 8-armed arrogant Luohan. It's done! Chuanqiu smiled excitedly, and he didn't dare to underestimate the terrifying strength of his 8-armed anger. The full-formed 8-armed anger is almost at the same level as the whirling ancestor of the whirling sky. For some reason, the whirling ancestor was far beyond the peak of Yanxian and reached a more profound state. And this 8-armed angry eyes has naturally exceeded the peak of Yanxian and has reached a certain unknown level. Looking at this almost ugly figure, all black-robed people stopped subconsciously for a moment. It was at this moment that a total of 8 black gold palms fell towards the ground with an unstoppable momentum. Boom! Because Yanxian was unable to dodge, the source was crushed on the spot, and the ancestors even disappeared, turning into a layer of nourishment and absorbed by the 8 arms. Brother Jian, let's go! Chuanqiu turned around and screamed angrily, it would be too late to go again. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, reached out to call out Taiman's ulterior motives, striving for an opportunity to escape. The giant palm covering the sky, which was made up of thousands of gods and soldiers, descended from the heavenly gate and fell to the ground in a covering manner. A group of Yanxian who had already known its power directly dispersed in a tacit manner, and their bodies rushed in all directions, blocking the retreat of several people in due course. The huamang subsided, and there are still thousands of black robes in the shape of the deep sea, which makes people breathless. One of the black-robe Yanxian took a step forward, pointed to the little emperor, and then said, "Leave him behind, any of you can leave this place, I will never stop." Chuanqiu looked at Jian Wushuang, with some urgency in his eyes. For him, it was obviously very good to be able to see the death of the enemy by siege. But without waiting for the sword Wushuang to open, the thin purple robe took the first step and slowly pulled down the hood on his head, revealing an old cheek covered with scars of the gully. At this level, even your master can't help it, let alone all of you. Chapter 4707. The black-robe Yanxian's eyes narrowed, and the murderous intention revealed, "Old fellow, you will definitely die today. If you are brave enough, just come and take it. Although the old man's strength is declining, but crushing you is just like crushing a group of bedbugs." Without speaking again, there were 12 Yanxian left. At this moment, all of them were dispatched, and all the terrifying Yanqi, which was enough to control one side of the heaven, was poured over. Jian Wushuang frowned. With his current strength, crushing the ordinary 3 or 5 Yanxian is not a problem, but now there are 12 Yanxian joint shots. Unless the 3 emperors are called out, they have a count 1, no one can escape. But the 3 emperors are now his last life-saving cards, and in this eerie wave of dying at the last moment of life-threatening, Jian Wushuang will never show anyone. He is confident that he can escape even if surrounded by so many Yanxian, but Xiaotajin and others may never escape. With all his palms, the more vigorous force directly forced the nearly 100 ancestors in front of him, headed by Jian Wushuang, and began to flee to the gateway to the heavenly city. Chuanqiu also evoked an 8-armed rage at this time. Under each wave of repression, there were several ancestors who could not dodge it. At this moment, the little emperor, a pair of cold eyes like blood dripping, and his pallid, bruised face turned red. The large number of people in this siege and the high level of it are obviously really running to kill him. A dead fight is inevitable, but his end seems destined. Along with a dark purple horror force rising, the thin black robe hunted around the purple robe. Between his palms, countless purple mansions connected to each other, turning into a longest straight knife. One of the most common straight swaying waves made the earth instantly cracked, and a tremendous stilt burst out with a breath of destruction, bursting out of those top repairs. There is no sound, even with every death of the top repair, no one made a sound, and some are just the tragic situation of fighting. This is a team with clear goals and strict discipline. It is hard to imagine even Jian Wushuang, who can have such a great energy, organized such a team led by nearly 20 Yanxian, over 1,000 ancestors team. Is it an emperor? There is no answer. The sword Wushuang at the moment is like a ranger swordsman without emotions. Every time the invisible long sword is swung in his hand, he easily harvests several ancestral lives. And after having an 8-armed glare, chunkiest strength sword, barely able to wander in the encirclement. As for the little emperor, as his face became more red, his strength decreased at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. If it were not for the protection of the thin purple robe, he might have already died in the surrounding circle. The 12 Yenxian, all surrounding the little emperor at this moment, apparently ran as long as he lived alone. Jian Wushuang, not far away, looked back subconsciously at the most previous paving. The mysterious guardian of the extreme did not know when it had disappeared, and no trace of it was left. With his hand, he quickly rubbed the day pattern bone armor, and Jian Wushuang quickly inserted it into the Bolyang bottle. At the same time, the voice of the tall and thin old man passed into his ears from the bowl of yang. Little friend, but what trouble are you having? I waited to feel that the outside world was not weak. Jian Wushuang heard the words and used his consciousness as a voice to pass into the bottle. There is no major problem for the time being. I am confident that I can leave this place. The 3 emperors heard the words, and after a reply, everything was calm again. The Sky City in the Chuan Tianyu began to collapse in a large area. Such a terrible battle has already recruited law enforcement in this heaven. Nearly 100 strong physiques in embroidered robes came from all directions. As the first middle-aged man in Yenxian realm galloped forward, he was stopped by dozens of ancestors. One of the ancestors faintly showed a golden seal. Ern said, "Idler's retreat." The middle-aged man's gaze was calm first, and then there was no sign of a violent murderous attack. A beam of diffusive force slammed into the front, directly smashing the ancestor level into powder. Idler's retreat? I came here today to ask for your life. Shen Shen's voice fell, and hundreds of embroidered robes soared into the sky, suddenly joined the battle. A total of 5 Yenxian. When they joined the battle, the pressure on everyone was relaxed. Little Emperor, Chen Qing is late, and he hopes to forgive sins. The middle-aged man held a fairy-like sword around his sword, tearing it apart, and came to the front of Little Emperor. The Little Emperor smiled miserably. Okay, it's not too late. This Jingchuan is so big, only you will come to save me. A sword flies to several ancestors. Chen Qing also looks dignified. They may have a bitter feeling. Without speaking again, Xiaotajin looked not far away. He was struggling to encircle the sword Wushuang, who had torn open a mouth. He, who had been silent for a while, seemed to have made a choice in his heart, but did not choose to leave. With a fierce rush from the bottom of my heart, Xiao Daijin's frowned brows suddenly sharpened. Looking at the top repairers who were like the sea, he smiled somberly, his palms quietly surging a dark purple flame. A realm of dark color spreads around him, and every inch of the earth swallowed quickly and madly. Innumerable pavilions have turned into powder in this eccentric field, while the rest of the black robes in this field have been repaired, only to feel the darkness in front of them. Seeing this scene, the thin purple robe covered with blood was a pity in his eyes. In his own field, the Little Emperor seems to have returned to its original appearance, and the state of a peak of Yenxian still seems to be climbing. Jian Wushuang's eyes were real, and his eyes were fixed. He could feel that the realm of the Little Emperor seemed to break through the layer of shackles in the middle of the world, and reached another unbelievable point. The long hair truncated to the shoulders is dancing in the wind, and the golden and silver lines depict the luxury hunting of the mountains and rivers. With a lightly pointed point, the space would be shattered, and the nearest Yenxian, who hadn't even reacted yet, suddenly shrunk into a massive chest, and then even with the Bodis origins vanished. One finger kill. Therefore, people have their eyes widened, and it is unbelievable. With just one finger, a Yenxian will disappear. How terrible will this be? Chuanxiu, don't look away, he thought back to the past. In the old days, the old man who had been serving him, as in this scene, was smashed into the fairy source, and he died together with the heaven. With the one finger killing Yenxian, The little Emperor Junsun cold eyes stared at all the top repairs in front of him. Chapter 4708. Another finger out, a yen xian in the same way, will be destroyed by the body fairy source. Of the 12 yen xian, only 10 are left at the moment, and there are more than 800 ancestors at the same time. Looking at him so easily, he killed a yen xian. Rao Shijian Wushuang secretly shocked to know that even he himself can never be so freehand. Standing in his own field, the little emperor is like an undoubted master, taking away dozens of black robe ancestors with each wave. The thin purple robe, Qin Qing and others also reacted and started to fight back. After Jian Wushuang looked back, he continued to break open. The stolen cold, more than 10 yen xian, only 8 left now. Eventually, a black robe yen xian reacted and took a difficult thing out of his arms and then nailed hard to the ground. It was a slap-sized flag. With the fall of this first flag, all black robe top repairers took the same flag from their arms and threw it out. There are nearly 100 flags with strange energy, and when they fall into the air, they directly link with each other to form a large formation and directly suppress them. The skinny purple robe changed dramatically, and he wanted to reach out and grab the flag, but he was a little late. The flag was like a burst of sight, and once the imposing blockade landed on the ground, it instantly broke the domain of the little emperor, like a big clock, and hugged it firmly in it. It seemed that he had suffered a bite, and the little emperor suddenly burst out a ray of red blood, and a terrifying dynamism languished at a rate visible to the naked eye. Chen Qing looked terrified, and the long sword lingering in his hand was stabbed at the magic circle. However, the invincible sword edge lost its previous role this time. Even the magic circle had not been shaken at all. "Master!" The thin purple robe rushed forward, and because of the rush of fire, even if he vomited a sigh of blood. The black robe Yenxian, who gradually wrapped several people in it, after seeing this scene at the moment, instead stopped and looked at them playfully. This formation specially designed for the little emperor, once trapped, even without the need for others to work, the body fairy source will be automatically destroyed and dissolved. There is no possibility of survival. He and Qin Qing alone could not break through the large array like a deep prison, and the thin purple robe had red eyes. It was completely crazy to desperately urge the force to destroy this array. The little emperor seems to have expected his own ending, but instead sits calmly and wipes the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looks at the thin purple robe and smiles. "Large companion, leave it as far as possible. If Jian Wushuang is willing to take you, then follow him." The thin purple robe shook his head. He seemed to realize something, and suddenly turned back to look at Jian Wushuang, who was not far away. Then he knelt down on one knee. "Please save the little emperor." All Yen Xian's face changed slightly after hearing the words, and after glancing at Jian Wushuang, in order to prevent the late changes, they started again. The figure flew into formation, and nearly 10 terrors were intertwined, striving to take away the life of the little emperor. With a deep sigh in his heart, Jian Wushuang finally took a step forward, and his unparalleled strength surging out swayed away the whole body in an instant. A kind of black robe ancestor who wanted to stop was surprised to find that they couldn't make it. Chuanqiu followed behind him, using his 8 arms to furiously block some attacks. A magnificent river constructed entirely of swords is like a tianhe rewinding, sweeping forward with the finger of Jian Wushuang. The real Chunqing's eyes that he saw opened to the maximum. He also entered the Tao with a sword. How can he not understand the horror of this sword like a huge ocean? Even if he practiced kendo to the point where even Yenxian could not meet, but after seeing this magnificent sword, he knew directly and clearly that he could not stop it. Where is this mysterious young man like a ranger? Everything seemed to be condensed, and the 8 Yenxian were even in midair, except for the sword running forward. The forbidden circle composed of hundreds of flags, under the impact of this magnificent long river of swords, only existed for a moment, and then instantly shattered. The 8-in-1 terror force, which should have bombarded the little emperor, were all destroyed in the long river. There are those who are closer, and the gods are cut off by the endless kendo on the spot. Who took another step, die. Jian Wushuang said indifferently, but his eyes never looked at the Yanxian from beginning to end, as if they were like air. The magic circle was broken, and the little emperor who sat on the ground looked at Jian Wushuang and slightly raised the corner of his mouth. The thin purple robe and Qin Qing and others were on his side. Jian Wushuang looked at him indifferently, then turned his head slightly. Go. The 8 Yanxian encircled and stepped forward in time. One of the oldest black-robe Yanxian stepped forward and gritted his teeth. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and said softly, "There is one who counts, and those who leave here, I can leave you a way of life. If you insist on blocking, you will all stay here." As soon as this word came out, all the black-robe repairs were stunned, and then all looked strangely at Jian Wushuang. This young man dressed as a ranger, who can't see any identity or state. Although it is extremely terrifying about Yanli's control, it is not incapable of dealing with it. Cowardly instead of ranting? Is this really his skill or whole card, or is he outrageous? A group of Yanxian reacted first, and laughed for the first-year elder. "It is not us that is left, but you are right." At the end of the speech, a magnificent beam of diffusive light poured out and ran straight to the sword without a double-sided door. He didn't even look at him with his right eye. Jian Wushuang slammed his body to the side, and a force with awe-inspiring killing force bombarded the past. The grinning smile holding the winning ticket even hung on the face. At the next moment, the older Yanxian flew directly out. It is enough for the elder who is in the realm of Yanxian realm to drink a pot. The sword Wushuang that has been completely released, without the baggage in his heart, just like entering the unmanned land, walks indifferently in the surrounding circle. If he is really unable to cope with it, the big picture directly summons the true shadow of the 3 emperors, and it will be completely cleared here. If the little emperor is investigated later, it may not be investigated further. "Don't grind, you leave first, I'll take care of it," Jian Wushuang said softly. The thin purple robe solemnly thanked, and then opened the way with Qin Qing and others. Little Emperor glanced back at Jian Wushuang, pretending to be relaxed. "Thank you, I owe you once. Keep your life before you talk." He still had no extra expression. Chapter 4709. Jian Wushuang seems to always look like everything is in his chest, and he is impatient. From the perspective of Xiaodigen, it seems that everyone around him is not like him, and he is a maverick. The invisible sword sprang up quietly, condensing around him. Together. 10 ways. Mandao. Countless invisible long swords rose from the sky and turned into a terrifying cloud covering the sky, hanging above the head of each black robe. A great horror between life and death surged in everyone's heart. Even Yanxian felt a chill in the sword curtain. Qin Qing, who was escorting the little emperor, looked back at this scene in shock, and there was a deep fear in his eyes flashing before turning around. Jian Wushuang's body was floating around like a lone sword that was independent of the rest of the world. No one could see through his thoughts and thoughts. As he moved forward every step, the sword curtain suspended above the sky dome stepped forward to make a copy. There are ancestor-level repairs that are bold and exogenous. A tentative step is taken, and there is a sword in the sky, and a sword is cut. Pooh is so subtle that it can no longer be subtle, just like the sound of dying sounded in the sky city that is about to break. That ancestor-level Dingxiu was crushed into powder, and even the internal sources were broken together. There is no possibility of resurrection. Just a sword in tension, he beheaded an ancestor level. Looking at the extremely dense sword curtain on the sky dome, all the ancestors stepped back subconsciously, and their faces were all horrified. For a time, even a few Yanxian dared not act rashly. Jian Wushuang glanced coldly at all of them, and his footsteps accelerated slightly. Although the sky is full of momentum, he knows that if he really wants to get started, these swords can at least be able to kill the 100 ancestors, and if the 8 Yanxian work together, I am afraid the effect will be greatly reduced. So Jian Wushuang is betting that they dare not step forward. Once out of this heavenly city, it would be much easier to escape. But within a few miles, the Yanxian glanced at each other, and a fierce outflow sprang out. No matter the sword curtain in the sky, they joined forces to siege up. Jian Wushuang was shocked in his heart, and he almost released the sword curtain without thinking. However, this sword curtain has a shock to the ancestor-level repair, but it is still a bit weak for the joint force of Yanxian. When a black-robed Yanxian waved his hand and shook his strength, he slammed all the sword curtains close to him and ran straight to Jian Wushuang. "Boy, no matter who you are, just leave your life here today." 8 Yanxian rushed forward together, the strength of his hand was changing, and went straight to Jian Wushuang's pocket. After the majestic and terrifying force turned into a big net cover, Jian Wushuang pushed Spring and Autumn far away from the battle circle, snorted coldly, and held a long sword to confront. In a flash of 100,000 swords, the leading black-robe Yanxian just waved his palms to seal it, and suddenly felt a sharp sword breaking through the void, and stabbed directly. In 1,000 shots, he made the most correct choice. His body suddenly slanted, and most of his left body instantly shattered. His body was broken, and the unbearable severe pain made him cry. A fluke's expression even hung in his eyes, but the sword and mango that broke out completely in the next moment ripped into pieces. All the top repairs are crazy, and no one controls the strength of Jian Wushuang's strength. They are all pressed like torrents. If the little emperor escapes, they have a chance to count, and there is no possibility of survival when they return to life. Only by killing him completely can they survive. The sword's two-sided color changed into one. At this moment, the boundless blazing power all rushed down to him, and the entire vast city was all under the pressure of terror. He didn't hesitate anymore. He directly led the sword and kneaded the two styles of the unparalleled swordsword into one form, forming an unparalleled sword. Leading into the sky, the madness of the force to suppress the sky is rapidly rising, and then resolutely hit the general trend of more than 500 people and 7 Yanxian forces. There is a giant gleam flashing in the galloping, the earth passing through the Chuantian domain is cracking, and the cracks in the heavens are like a prison, and the earth is fierce. We must know that the strength of each of the heavens in this great Yanhuan is far stronger than any place in the divine universe. Even there is no comparability between them. The place that can accommodate the immortals to sit and practice is already the ultimate place in the world. But Rao is such a heavenly domain, and both of them collapsed when they collided. The little emperor who was being surrounded by Qin Qing and the thin and small purple robe, after feeling the power of ruining the earth, suddenly a pale red appeared on his pale face. Then he suddenly broke free from Qin Qing and stepped on it, stepping directly on the waist of his 8-armed angry eyes, and took advantage of it to gallop behind him. "Little Emperor!" Qin Qing shouted anxiously, but he could not stop it. He could only watch the little emperor's figure go away. And the thin purple robe called Dabin, without hesitation, returned almost at the moment when Xiaodi Jundong left. Qin Qing gritted his teeth, and then flew to the back of the fierce battle. The Spring and Autumn sitting on the shoulders of the 8 arms with angry eyes were also a bit dazed. For him, the little emperor went back to die, which was considered the hatred and resentment in his heart, but he also thought of the sword Wushuang that was broken by himself. Suddenly, the 8 arms under him stopped glaring, and Chuanxiu looked back, looking like a moth. At the next moment, he also flew back to his body without any hesitation. "Little Emperor? It's still a pleasure to die in my hands by myself. I'm going to save only Brother Jian." A unique sword that transcended the meaning of the previous kendo, and broke through the supreme trend layer by layer, but then it was replaced by a more vigorous Yanli theory. Jian Wushuang is supporting the dynamism in the body is madly passing, and it is already impossible to catch. As he prepared to call out the 3 emperors in desperation, a pair of palms without any blood, and next to him, stuck on the majestic momentum. Jian Wushuang was a little shocked. The person who came was not someone else. It was the little emperor who was likely to pass out almost at any time. "Did I let you go?" Under such oppression, Jian Wushuang still gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice. The little emperor smiled slightly, and a ray of divine blood overflowed again at the corner of his mouth. "After 6 days of return, you must be there. Don't forget, you still have a promise to help me ascend to the throne." If you are dead, I will lose a lot of money. The Yanli released with all his strength seems to have a heavy load on his divine body, and even his eyes can't be opened. But Rao is so, Xiaotigen seems to have something to export. Remember, you can't do it without you if you return for 6 days. Chapter 47:10. Jian Wushuang is really hard to say. Originally thinking of taking advantage of them to leave, he could call out the 3 emperors to end the battle. He never wanted to turn back again, which made Jian Wushuang's hard state of mind a little loose, but extremely helpless. Looking at the appearance of his strong crossbow, he was considering whether to kick it off, and then 2 or 3 strong breaths appeared. Qin Qing and the thin purple robe directly framed the little emperor. Qin Qing embarrassed, "Brother, I'm sorry, we have to take the little emperor away." Jian Wushuang heard the words, secretly relieved, and then quickly spoke, "Hurry away." Qin Qing nodded and stood ready to leave with the little emperor. "No, I can't leave." The little emperor struggled. Jian Wushuang said helplessly, "I'll be there later." "Really? Really?" Affirmed, Xiaotigen nodded with satisfaction, then fainted. Immediately afterwards, Chuanqiu arrived and laughed, "Brother Jian, it's time to fight side by side again." Jian Wushuang reported with a smile, turned around and looked at the little emperor who had gone away, secretly relieved, and then freed up a hand to open the bottle stopper. Every emperor, Jianmo asked for help. "Good boy, he is so suffocated that the emperor is almost unable to hold his breath in the bottle." The real shadow of the prestigious old man with long beard emerged from the bottle. Then an old man with a bizarre double pupil followed, and finally the tall, thin old man. With the true shadows of the 3 imperial clothes worn out, the entire Jingchuan reached the edge of collapse. Their appearance reversed the entire Tiancheng battle almost instantly. As the first digital Yenxian, after seeing this scene, his eyebrows jumped violently at the same time, and the figure drilled out of nowhere actually had a weird ripple floating on each body. Why do these guys have some familiar breath on them? The tall, thin old man moved. "No matter who they are, let's kill them first." The old man of Wei stubbornly drank and immediately flicked his sleeves. The weight for the supreme majesty pressure squeezed away almost for a moment. The power that belongs to another level directly withstands the pressure of the nearly 1,000 ancestors, which makes Jian Wushuang one by one and can free his hands. The 3 emperors shot at the same time, almost already laid the ending. The general situation was easily broken, and the 3 emperors rushed forward almost with a smile. With each wave of their hands, all the ancestors of the ancestors vanished, and even those Yenxian could not compete. If this emperor's true soul, Jian Wushuang, can still barely balance, then at the moment these 3 emperors appear, even he has only the part to kill. From Wan Mushin's taking away the 3 emperors, Jian Wushuang has a kind of unreal feeling, and these 3 supremely powerful helpers are almost confused, almost giving him the most terrible card directly in Dianhuan. Just the state of the true soul, it is easy to kill the current repair, Jian Wushuang dare not imagine. If this is the real body of the emperor, what a terrible strength. Looking at the almost ruined 3 emperors, Chun Qiu, who had already held the life and death coexisted, widened his eyes, and then looked at Jian Wushuang and smiled bitterly. "Brother Jian, when we went to Wan Yushan, we did not come hard. Or I'm afraid we're already outrageous." Jian Wushuang took this for granted. If Yang Jun, the true shadow of the tall and thin old man, was desperate at that time, they would absolutely not be able to stand here now. At the same time, it can also be seen that Xiaotigen sent them both to Wan Yushan, and apparently wanted to use the hands of the 3 emperors to erase them. As a result, the image of Xiaotigen was much worse in Jian Wushuang's heart. He had already figured it out in his mind, and after he cleared the enemies under his eyes, he and Chuanqiu walked away. Even if his little emperor has even greater energy, he can still extend his palm to the entire Dianhuan? After making the decision, Jian Wushuang did not have any hesitation anymore, and lifted up the sky, and the whole person turned into a sword with the most sharp edge, stabbed forward straight. This tragic battle eventually turned into one-sided slaughter with the arrival of the three emperors. With the tragic howl, the last Yen Xian was directly crushed by the Wei old man. At this point, there are only less than 100 ancestors left in the mighty siege army. Leave, let us go. The head of the black robe ancestor stepped back slowly, his eyes showing despair. Jian Wushuang was cold-eyed and stretched his hand to hold in the air, and the black robe ancestor covered his neck in pain and struggled. "Who sent you? Why did you kill him?" asked one after another. All the surviving ancestors in black robes were horrified. If they said it, it would be no different from the immediate death sentence. "Say!" Jian Wushuang's sharp brows twisted into a Sichuan shape, and he increased his strength. Feeling the real life-and-death horror, the hard-breathed black robe ancestors never dared to hide. "I don't know, I'm a father, a son." Without saying a word, the strange dark light directly emerged from his chest, burning his source. The remaining black robe ancestors saw it, and their faces were all horrified. At this moment, they all scattered and fled. Looking at the figures scattered in all directions, the old man with heavy pupils snorted coldly, and the four pupils in his eyes turned strangely. At the next moment, the entire sky dome suddenly became dark. With the darkness, there were countless strange eyeballs like the sun. All escaping black robe ancestors only felt that when they entered the mud, the air around them began to stagnate. Then they subconsciously looked at the sky dome, and faced with the countless big eye-like eyes. There seemed to be something that was quickly stripped from their bodies, and at the same time, the life that was so long that it almost had no end began to reverse. Each pupil of Dingxiu changed from panic to godlessness, finally died, and then fell straight to the ground like the same mud. Jian Wushuang's true look, at the same time that these tops were cultivating and declining, the roots poured into the eyeballs in the sky. This kind of mighty power should be the magical power of the old double pupil. Make another killing, guilty, and Suha old man will come with me to reflect on it carefully. The tall, thin old man looked serious, holding the old man with heavy pupils. The old man with heavy pupils withdrew his magical power and squinted his lips in disdain. "Come on, you two Yenxian who have been killed, I am afraid that even the heavenly court can't hold it. How dare you say it is a killing industry? Look, the killing heart is about to cover up the original heart. It seems that the emperor will be necessary to guide you in the future." The tall and thin old man said with a curse. "Okay, don't say a few words," the elder Wei said, and then looked at Jian Wushuang. "Zioius' next plan?" Chapter 47:11. Jian Wushuang's eyes were indecisive, and finally he said slowly, "Destroy this Jingchuan completely before leaving." The three emperors nodded with no refutation. Next, a horrible scene was staged. Headed by Jian Wushuang, unite the power of the three emperors to turn into unimaginable supreme power and sink to the earth. The Jingchuan, which had already been cracked in a large area, was completely destroyed. The gully-like abyss spreads deep into the earth's core, radiating the entire plain like a cobweb. In the end, this super heaven passed through the river and was broken, and countless ruins were turned into a giant boulder, wandering in the void. Many of them lived here in the Chuanzhong Dingxiu and have lost their homes. Looking at the heavenly ground broken into powder, Chuanxiu almost glared out his eyes, knowing that this Jingchuan is a legendary emperor's dojo, and it almost became the existence of a spare heaven. With a pity in my heart, Chuanxiu ignored the broken heaven that had no value anymore, and followed Jian Wushuang to prepare to leave. The three emperors re-entered the Boyang bottle as if they had never appeared from beginning to end. "Brother Jian, from now on we will be high-flying birds, and the sea is wide by leaps and bounds. Wherever you go, I will follow you in the spring and autumn. There is absolutely nothing." The prisoner's career made him desperate for freedom. Jian Wushuang also smiled, looking at the vast yet strange Dianhuan. Even he began to feel a sense of powerlessness. In Dianhuan, who has surpassed his existing cognition, who wants to find those two existences, who knows that it will be an unknown future. Let's go one step at a time. I need a good idea. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. Chuanxiu kept busy and nodded. If Brother Jian does not know the next step, it would be better to go with me to the old site of my emperor's former heaven. Jian Wushuang did not nod or refuse. He was thinking about his next step. Unconsciously, the two of them walked out of the Jingchuan portal, but the next scene made Jian double-sided color slightly change. I saw that in the void where the boulders lay, 3 figures were sitting on a boulder. It seemed to wait for a long time, and when they appeared, they hurried. Brother Sword, I think you have encountered such a big movement. Qin Qing got up and beckoned from afar. Jian Wu's double-faced color is obviously not good-looking. He didn't expect that the little emperor did not leave, but waited far away. Chuanxiu frowned slightly and whispered, Brother Jian, how are you going to kill it? While Jian Wushuang was hesitant, the little emperor in a coma slowly opened his eyes, wondering if he was confused or careless, and stepped forward subconsciously, actually fell directly from the boulder, straight into the void in. Jian Wushuang hurriedly manipulated Yan Li Ping to drag his falling figure and pulled it around. I knew that you would never die. Little Emperor said this last sentence while he was in a coma. Jian Wushuang was helpless. The eyes of Chuanxiu around him were cold, and he signaled his death. But Jian Wushuang shook his head. He didn't like the little emperor. He didn't like it, and he didn't rise to the endless situation. Qin Qing and the thin and small purple robe hurried over to take the little emperor in Jian Wu's hands. Then, the thin purple robe took something out of his arms and threw it in the air to meet the storm and became a giant ship. Please, Master Sword, board the ship. He glanced at Jian Wushuang, then nodded. Because he was embarrassed to leave, Jian Wushuang had to get on the thief ship leading to the realm of 6 days again. Because the Jingchuan Tianyu was completely destroyed, Qin Qing had no place to stay, so he had to go to the 6th heaven realm together. Sitting on the bow of the ship, Jian Wushuang was struggling at the moment with a piece of the sky-shaped bone armor obtained from the Sky City. The pattern engraved on it by some tools was strange, but there were some vicissitudes in it. Xian. First, damn, why can't I see it now? Is it a matter of angle? Jian Wushuang carefully looked at the bone armor, and he actually saw the word Xian Yi from the bone armor. Besides, what exactly was the guardian taking from my body? Supernatural power, ancestral art, or vitality? Jian Wushuang frowned at his palm, trying to find some difference in it, but while he was attentive, he was interrupted by a cold, deep voice. Young master, I know it is you, and I will kill you when I go back. Jian Wushuang looked back. The voice came from Xiaodaijian's mouth, but it should be a dream, but after yelling this voice, he fell asleep again. The thin purple robe is constantly sending Yanli to try to make Xiaodaijian more comfortable. And at the same time, Qin Qing walked towards Jian Wushuang. For this tough, middle-aged man with few corners, Jian Wushuang did not have much resistance. After nodding, he was ready to continue to study the sky-shaped bone armor in his hand. Brother Sword, I don't see much in Qin Qing's eyes, but you count 1, Qin Qing sighed. In the heavenly city, Sword Brother, the sword intention you released, I didn't realize it. Pass the prize, feel it with your heart, you will definitely go to that step. Jian Wushuang followed. Qin Qing smiled bitterly. I am afraid that Kendo can no longer be completed. After going to the 6-day realm, I really hope to be able to fight against the Sword Brothers 1 or 2 to see the gap between us. Welcome at any time. Jian Wushuang nodded. A look of joy appeared on Qin Qing's face, and he slightly arched his hand at Jian Wushuang. It seemed like I remembered Jian Wushuang turned his head to look at Qin Qing and asked, who is the son of the son he just corrected? After hearing this, Qin Qing's face changed slightly, and after looking back at the little emperor he said, in fact, this is not a big secret. The people under the little emperor's seat are basically clear. The son-in-law in the mouth of the little emperor is actually his second brother. Second brother? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, apparently recalling the original sentence that Xiao Dijuan just said I would kill. Qin Qing also realized what Jian Wushuang thought, and smiled bitterly, but between their brothers, it is almost like a dead enemy now. This time the interception by the Chuantianqing, I have also suspected that now through the little emperor's statement, it will be clear, it is likely that his second brother's son corrected, instructed. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows again, but he clearly remembered the battle of the interception. There were more than 15 Yenxian and nearly 1,000 ancestors. Such terrible handwriting is definitely the result of the complete elimination. It's an unusual battle between brothers. Chapter 47:12. And Jian Wushuang is also curious. How does this so-called prince correction have such a large energy? You should know that this is not a party for dinner, and a team can be formed by anyone who comes, but it is composed of 15 Yenxian and more than 1,000 ancestors. Being able to pull out such a team seems to be determined to put his brother to death. It's no wonder that Xiaodijin was ruthless in his sleep to kill his son. If there is no sword Wushuang, he is in a catastrophe and has already fallen into Jingchuan. But if there is no Jian Wushuang, he will not necessarily go to Jingchuan, and all this will not happen. Are you so sure that it was his second son's corrective actions? Jian Wushuang asked again. Chen Qingning frowned, then shook his head slightly. It's not certain, but there is a lot of suspicion. After all, after the little emperor came to this position, they began to fight between the 7 sons. Jian Wushuang nodded, then a little surprised. Wait, Qi Gongzi? Chen Qing nodded. There are 7 sons under the seat of Emperor Zhenwing, namely Gongzi Yan, Gongzi Jiao, Gongzi Yu, Gongzi Qian, Gongzi Mo, Gongzi Hua, Gongzi Lin. These 7. The little emperor's famous son Xian is also the eldest brother of the other 6 sons. Jian Wushuang listened to Chen Qing's careful explanation, nodded, and looked at the little emperor who was not far away, leaning on the deck and was still in a coma. Sure enough, Big Brother is not good. He knew that there must be some reason for this, and at the same time he recalled the conditions he had been forced to promise in the Bronze Temple. The first condition is to help him ascend to the throne, and within 70 years. But at the thought of those who haven't met each other, they felt the dreadful means of the sons. Jian Wushuang inexplicably felt a big head. Why did you kill Xiaodijin? Although he knew in his heart that Xiaodijin was not a good person, Jian Wushuang asked curiously. There was another bitter smile on Chen Qing's face. I'm afraid it's a bit inconvenient to say this. The things involved are more secretive and complicated. Jian Wushuang nodded. When he just wanted to respond, the thin purple robe walked slowly, as if there was no joy on the old cheek in a moment. There is nothing inconvenient to say. You have rescued Xiaodijin many times, and you should also know some secrets. Slender Xiao Zipeo spoke softly. Yongzi Yen died at an early age, his foundation was destroyed and he was no longer able to practice. But his Emperor Zhenwu Yang was particularly fond of him, and because he was the eldest son, he finally let him take the position of little emperor, but one after another 6 sons. All of them are absolutely stunning, and they all have a majestic trend, so they naturally will not convince the little emperor. Being a little emperor means all the heavens and all resources are inclined. As a result, the inevitable battle continues to this day. After listening to the brief description of the thin purple robe, Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. It turned out that he was involved in such a chaotic matter. I don't know whether it was happy or sad. At the same time, he was keenly aware that the skinny purple robe's eloquent expression must be the most secret thing hidden. However, Jian Wushuang didn't have the idea to continue to ask. In his opinion, he doesn't have too much trouble with Xiaodijin and others, so it doesn't make sense to investigate too deeply. After leaving the broken Jingchuan Tianyu, Jian Wushuang and others did not return along the previous giant sea, but left in the other direction. After all, if there is a more terrible existence under the giant sea than the giant sea sky chapter, it is really a big trouble. Under the control of the thin purple robe, the giant ship floated through the vast void of Yanli's vast speed, and rushed back to the 6-day realm in a time that was twice as fast as before. This made Jian Wushuang scold Xiao Emperor again. Returning to the 6-day realm, this great voyage was completely over in less than 10 years, but the bizarre twists and turns experienced in it still gave Jian Wushuang a preliminary understanding of this great Yanhuan. It's just a corner of the heavens, it's so scary and terrible, but it's just that Daanhuan is a little bit more terrified. He can't think of what else he will encounter later, so he can only take one step at a time. After returning to the realm of 6 days, the thin Xiaopao and Chen Qing kept holding the little emperor and returned to the Degushan. Although Xiaoyushan and Degushan were given to Jian Wuxuang by him, Jian Wuxuang had not been to the site so far. A layer of warm water-like enchantment was swayed, and Jian Wuxuang and Chuanqiu later entered it. Looking into the eyes, I saw that it seemed to have entered an untouched primitive green forest. The rich and extreme emerald green was the main color of this entire solitary sky. All kinds of exotic flowers and grasses open on the earth, and the life in the wild forest is almost as high as the extreme. This is not the most shocking place, and in the middle of this big lonely sky, there stands a giant tree like a giant pillar of Optimus. The sturdy main branch is wide and geometrically unknown, and the dark green canopy on the top of the head is like a cloud in the sky, almost covering the entire sky of the big lonely sky. It seems that the entire solitary ecosystem is just like a giant tree. The old thin purple robe-headed took the little emperor who was still in a coma, and swept toward the crown of the giant tree. "Brother Sword, please come with us." Chen Qing slightly arched his hand, and then took a meal, then his body galloped forward. Looking at the giant tree in front of him, Jian Wuxuang did not hesitate. One foot stepped in the mist-like clouds, soft touch came under his feet, Jian Wuxuang looked around again, then slowly stepped forward. Above the canopy of this giant tree is a more elegant warm pavilion. Chuanqiu is reluctant to enter it. It is convenient to wait outside and wait for the sword to be unparalleled. Walking into this warm pavilion, I saw a bed in the center. I don't know what kind of material is made of bed. The little emperor was placed on it, his face calmed down a lot, and the cold sweat of the temples stopped the outflow. If you look closely, you can see that countless powerful breaths of life gather in the air into the bed, and then constantly moisturize and repair his body. Jian Wuxuang guessed that this special bed should have an inseparable relationship with this big lonely tree. Seeing that Xiao Emperor's expression gradually stabilized, Chen Qing and others were secretly relieved. Jian Wuxuang saw this situation, and then stayed for a moment, then slowly left the Nuan Pavilion. Outside the Nuan Pavilion, Chuanqiu was alone, staring at this side of the world, and when he saw him coming out, he withdrew his thoughts and greeted with a strong smile, "Brother Jian, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.